Yes, I can hear you. Good evening. I would like to call to order this Anoka-Hennepin School Board Work Session for today, August 11th, 2025. Our first order of business is to approve the board agenda. Is there a motion to approve the board agenda as presented? Thank you, Director Audette. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director DeShane. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will Acting Clerk Casey DeShane call the roll, please?
Simon.
Aye.
Audette. Hoekman. Aye. DeShane votes aye. Arco.
Aye. With 5 in favor and 0 opposed, the agenda is approved. So members, the next item on our agenda is item 3, the consent agenda. As normal, members can remove items for separate consideration and discussion if that's their desire. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Director DeShane. Is there a second? Thank you, Director Hoekman. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll, please?
Simon.
Aye.
Audette. Aye. Hoekman. Aye. DeShane votes aye. Arco.
Aye. With 5 in favor and 0 opposed, our consent agenda is approved. Our next agenda item is item 4, the work session, and we will begin with item 4A, school safety and security update. Welcome Greg Cole, Chief Operations Officer and team.
Good evening, co-chairs Arco, DeShane, Superintendent McIntyre, members of the school board. I'm joined today, and I'll just start with my right, by BJ Eisen, our Director of Transportation, Ben Martinson, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and Tim Fournier, Manager of Security and Emergency Operations. We are here today to provide you with an annual update with regard to safety and security district-wide. Typically, Tim and I present this to you. This year, we thought that it would be important to kind of expand the understanding and definition of dealing with incidents across our school district, just so there's broader awareness about the types of things that we manage and the way in which we manage them, from communication to protocols and decision-making metrics that we use in order to try to make the best possible decision we can in a timely fashion with regard to some of the things that happen across the school district. So we're here to share important work regarding safety and security and some of the improvements that we've made, provide an update on school board investments that we've talked about in the past, and we'll give you an update on that. And then also, we'd like to continue to provide updates on our partnerships and collaborations with our law enforcement partners across the school district. So first off, from a 30,000-foot view, so to speak, some of the things that could contribute most to school safety and security have a lot to do with what happens within our schools. So strong leadership and pride and strong school culture and climate. Schools with open lines of communications where our students feel safe reporting things that concern them, whether it be to their peers or to a trusted adult, as long as, and if they're doing it with their peers know to and have connections with trusted adults in our buildings. Research from a variety of sources nationwide. I'd say the most prominent of which is the Department of Homeland Security talks about one of the best, most important safety and security anti-violence measures a school can have is a strong culture and climate where people feel safe and they feel like they have people they can trust to share information with when things happen or there's concerns out there. Awareness and vigilance, infrastructure, So that is a piece of this. It's not just the reporting mechanisms or the culture and climate. It is important to have the infrastructure in place, which this board has been supportive of for some time, that allows us to ensure that our exterior doors are secure. We have a robust visitor management system, that we improve our ability to respond to things from an infrastructure standpoint as well. You'll hear a little bit too how training and planning goes into that, to constantly be looking at and thinking about different scenarios in a way that is respectful of and aware of the age group of the students that we're working with. That's a fine balance there in terms of making sure that you prepare. I'd say we really try to focus on preparing our adults, who are going to be the people that the kids turn to in situations for direction and guidance. So we want to be sure that they're prepared, but we also want to be sure that our students have awareness to the level that they're able to manage depending on their age and development. How we partner with law enforcement in a variety of different ways, and Tim will talk more about that. And then two things that we try to assess on a regular basis and have our school leaders assess is where they're vulnerable, so that they let us know that, so we can take steps to try to improve. And also reunification. Reunification can't just look like one thing. It really depends on the nature of what it is you're dealing with, where the kids are at what time of day, where's transportation at that moment. So reunification can look a little bit different depending on the nature of what you're dealing with and what time it happens. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Fournier to talk about what we call wraparound services that occur with certain types of incidents that we manage across the school district.
Good evening. I think it's important to remember that we have multiple types of incidents. We have an incident that might affect the site, it might affect one of our buildings, and then we have other incidences that affect mental health and affect student well-being. And so we try to deal with these situations as they come up and attack them, if you will, with a variety of resources when it comes to what type of incident it is. And I think we have a really robust system for identifying the type of incident and then putting resources on it that would help, alleviate the problem and work with how things go forward from there, especially when it comes to student mental health, student services side of it. I think I'm really proud of our student services group, the counselors, the mental health professionals that we work with. So it's the physical stuff, building emergencies, the things we typically see every year nationwide, threats, that kind of thing that come in online, and then we have that other component of it. And the training, the emergency management training that our staff goes through really prepares them for such things, and identifying what needs to be dealt with quickly and what fires can be put out fast so we don't have a larger problem. And that also delves into the next bullet, which is that positive school relationship. And that's relationships that we have with our law enforcement and with our school personnel themselves. Our principals and our APs and our school staff work really well together, whether it's a grade school talking with a high school because they're across the street. The relationships that we cultivate both internally with the kids and with our own staff members makes a huge difference. And our systems are in place, as Greg alluded to. We have systems in place to manage incidents. A lot of this is based on Homeland Security stuff. It's straight up emergency management, and we kind of have that version of it for the school district, that how we manage incidents. And it's important too, at the end of an incident, to go back and look at what worked, what didn't work, where are supports needed going forward, and can we learn something from what we just went through? And the post-incident support is a very important thing. It's like incident incident support for law enforcement, fire, same kind of thing. We look at that for our students and staff as well. So it's that collaboration with student services, law enforcement, and other districts that really helps keep us on top of things and deal with things as they come up. Because what happens in our district usually happens to a neighboring district, or what happens to a district down in southern Minnesota may affect our district. So I stay in touch with a lot of my counterparts throughout the state when it comes to this stuff, and we have regular meetings because we talk with each other all the time. So I think we've got a really good system in place to deal with this.
And just one thing to be aware of, the reason we spend time collaborating with different departments within our organization, and it's law enforcement is a prime example, is you want to ensure that the people in particular roles are the right people to be dealing with a part of a situation. So for example, when we talk about a crisis that occurs, and that potentially could be, I'll use an example of student death, or some type of awful tragedy like that. On the front end, you may have assistant principals sort of looking into something, trying to assess, what it is we're dealing with. But once they feel like they're in a position where they need to be getting deeper into an area where a student needs very specific types of supports, they're going to be handing that off to somebody that has that expertise to be able to manage that type of situation. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on to ensure, that's where we talk about the wraparound services, because sometimes there's trauma as a result of some pretty tough things that happen. And, we want to be sure that we have the right people working with students and families at the right times. Law enforcement's a prime example. They'll tell you that there are certain things that they're really good at. That's what they train to do. And then there are certain things that they're going to hand off to someone else because it's that other person's expertise is what that individual needs at that particular time. So we really practice those same types of protocols in our school district and talk a lot about different types of scenarios that pose those types of challenges to us. Okay. So moving on to kind of a different way of, or different type of incident management, I'm going to turn it over to Ben here to give you an update on our monitoring and locking installation across the school district, which was a school board strategic priority and strategic investment.
Thanks, Greg. So yeah, I think we started this project probably about 2 years ago, kind of just identifying the issue, looking out for vendors, trying to find a solution that could be holistic and be a one-stop shop district-wide. So we weren't dealing with multiple different platforms that could have problems when we're trying to initiate any of our protocols. We broke that up into 5 different bid packs or phases. As of today, we have 1 through 3 are done. We have 33 out of the 48 sites have been completed. River Trail will be finished probably this week, and that'll close out bid pack 4 or phase 4. Phase 5, we started in June. That's a total of 16 sites. 4 of them will be done before school starts here in September, and the rest will be completed by the end of November. So we're getting there. It's just a lot of buildings to get through and manage. So, but we're in the home stretch here, so we're excited to have that done and just have the one platform to deal with and feel a lot more comfortable about our access solutions. So.
And I want to give a shout out to Joe Borman. There's a lot of coordination with technology that goes on with regard to these systems. It's important to know that anytime we have a platform that interfaces with our network, there's a pretty extensive process we need to go through to ensure that we don't have vulnerabilities when we're introducing that new software into our system. Because each time you do that, you have to assess that vulnerability because cybersecurity is really a big part of security. Mobile device application, we've mentioned this to you in the past. We needed to ensure that our Genetec locking system was in place, and we knew the full application of the application, the app that people can have on their phones, which essentially helps certain key individuals within a school lock the facility down faster. Really this is about ensuring that we have consistency across the entire school district, as well as increasing or decreasing, I should say, the amount of time it takes us to respond to something. One thing we know about incidents is that time is really important. Seconds matters. So anything and everything we can do to slow somebody down and make it harder for them to potentially do things they shouldn't be doing, that's potentially a life-saving thing. So that's important. We're looking at the final phase here is an application that improves our communication with specific groups. You'll kind of see some communication challenges that we have. We may communicate in a whole number of different ways. It could be text. We have a radio system that works throughout the entire school district, so you can be in one building, and if you have the designated channel, you can communicate with somebody across the district in another. But we are also looking at an app that would create a different type of communication. Sometimes we have traveling teachers So we need ways to communicate with people who might not physically be at a site, but they're driving to a site, and they need to have awareness about something that might be happening there. That's one example. There's many different types of scenarios. So we're very close on selection of that. Again, we have to work with technology on that because we're introducing potentially something else into our network system. But I hope you hear from this that we remain vigilant about a commitment to improving our reaction and response and decreasing our response time so that we're faster and more nimble when we deal with situations. Now I'm going to talk about drills. I mentioned that before, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tim again to talk about our protocols for that and what we regularly do on a cycle throughout each year.
So as you know, the state does mandate we do certain drills. And we have 5 drills that were, 5 lockdown, lockout type drills that we're responsible for. We have 5 fire drills we have to do by law. And and then 1 weather drill. Every spring we do a weather awareness drill, tornado warning type. There's a whole week to that. And we take those drills seriously. And in between those drills, each site, depending on their time and what they can fit into their schedule, they do other drills. And they do low-level stuff. A lot of times they'll do tabletop exercises with the crisis team and things like that to keep their skills up. Sometimes I'll stop by and we'll create a little scenario with some of the office staff and talk through how to handle things. But the drills prepare you for what happens for real. You will do, in reality, what you rehearse. And you'll act that way, in reality, how you act when you rehearse. So drills are really important, which is that overall crisis response that we have. And each site has its own crisis team, and then we have a district level team that kind of is an umbrella team over the rest of the teams that will assist and respond when necessary. So it's very emergency management structured, as I said before, but there's a reason for that. It just keeps it simple. And it allows us to rehearse and allows us to drill for what might come. Interestingly to note, there'll be another drill starting the 26-27 school year. There'll be a new mandated drill, and it's basically a cardiac arrest drill for using our defibrillators on our sites. So that'll be the next new mandatory drill that'll start next year.
Director DeShane?
Thank you. Tim, you mentioned the state mandated drills, the 5 lockout, lock in, and the 5 fire drills, and then the 1 weather. Are those all student engaged drills, or are
Right.
some of them just staff?
No, these are all the student engaged drills. So they've always been the student engaged drills. They've been around a long time. Recently, the state legislature decided to limit the type of drill you could do. We never did these kinds of drills as a district. Most metro districts don't. Some outstate districts had done this where they actually had someone playing a bad guy, and they would enter the building, and then the school would lock down. That became too realistic and too traumatic for a lot of the students and staff. So the state said, you know what, if you want to do those kinds of drills, you have to prepare a lot beforehand. You have to let parents know, let kids opt out. So they just put a caveat to those kinds of drills, but the ones you described, those are the mandated ones that we participate in every year, and the kids participate with those.
Thanks for clarifying.
Sure. Good question.
We do encourage our teams, too, to try to mix things up a little bit. So, things go smoothly when it's the middle of a class and everybody's where they're supposed to be. But many of our schools will do at least 1 or 2 where it's kind of at a chaotic time where, there's a lot of students maybe at passing time or a lunch time, those kinds of things. Obviously, we try to work with child nutrition because they're not happy when we do those types of things. But if we give them warning ahead of time, but it's really important to do that so that because, the bottom line is bad things don't usually happen at a convenient time. They usually happen at a really inconvenient time. So you need to prepare for that as best you possibly can without disrupting the school day. Just kind of how do things work when we talk about a district incident response team? What happens is there's a group of 10 people at the central office who, if any one of those people gets notified of something that is highly likely to impact a building in a pretty significant way or have widespread impact, that person makes sure all 10 people in that group know. From there, we form a sub-team because not all 10 people may need to be involved. It really depends on the nature of what we're dealing with. I don't know that it's great to have 10 people trying to manage something, so it's kind of the too many cooks in the kitchen idea. You want to identify the key people who need to be in there. The reason for that awareness is we are intertwined in so many different ways, and I will use early childhood as an example. We have early childhood programs going on throughout the day in about 25 different sites across the school district. They get bused at different times. There are all sorts of shuttles and so forth. And oftentimes that can be a group that's overlooked with regard to a completely different transportation system, parents coming in to pick up or drop off small children who are not school-aged yet, they're preschoolers. There's just a lot of different things like that that we have going on. And so, and we have a lot of different programs as well, like STEP and Compass, where you have shuttles moving during the day. And so it's really important to make sure that you have a large group with awareness so that people are like, hey, what about this? What about that? So that we make sure that we're not missing things or, missing people who need to get information very quickly. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim again to just talk a little more and remind people about our, the important law enforcement partnerships that we have across our school district.
Sure, and as we've gone over this before, but I think it bears repeating, we do work with our area police departments very well. We have 12 school resource officers from 9 different agencies that service us. The resource officers are housed in the high school and middle schools. However, they do make appearances at the elementary schools. And we have a DARE program in a lot of our elementary programs, so they're present there as well. We meet regularly, Greg and I do, and some of the other key staff with our chiefs and our sheriff department representatives. And we'll have another meeting this fall coming up. So we keep that communication open. 24-hour communication, that is one real big important advantage we have with working so well with our agencies. If something happens at one of the agencies' cities at 2 a.m. that may or may not affect busing for us, I get a call usually. And then we decide if this is going to affect the next day. And we've had some late night meetings where we've had to get on Google Meet and look at each other in our sleep and wonder how we're going to handle the next day because of what went on at one of the cities. So I think that works really well. That collaboration is super important. As is our inter-district collaborations with our neighboring districts. I have counterparts in all our neighboring districts, and if something happens, as I said, in one district, it usually bleeds into the other districts. And so we work really well with our fellow districts. And event security is just an example of that, where we have some intel about some activity that may occur at one of our events, whether it's a homecoming football game or you pick the sporting event. We will share resources from other districts in our district and vice versa, as far as police and security goes, so we can keep people safe and keep the intel coming in. So that partnership is something I'm proud of, and it's very key to our success and how we handle things when they occur.
I think the simplest way to explain some of this is in situations where we get information, we don't want to overreact and we don't want to underreact. That's the challenge. And so this information, speedy, timely information, is super important to making the best possible decision, because we take these decisions very seriously, right? We have kids in our care. We want to be sure that we're as careful as we possibly can be, but we also want to be sure that, if things are fine, that we're going to be able to run business as usual. Community engagement, again, there are a lot of different mechanisms where communication can happen throughout our district, ways in which people can report things. I want to give a shout out to Jim Skelly and his team for creating these different ways in which people can report things that they see. We want to continue, and you have to continue to encourage people to do that. You can't just say it once and then hope that it happens. And I like to use the airport as an example. If you're there, you're going to hear on a fairly regular basis, if you see something that doesn't look right, please report it. And I think that's similar type of mentality that we have, that's something, you don't want to do it every second, but you want to try to keep that, fairly regular so people can have that at their forefront. And there's other things listed here. We want to be sure we get feedback from community as well. We do get lots of information from community members who see things that just don't feel right or seem right to them. And we act on all of that. We check it out. And very often, it's the reason that we were able to take care of something that was not supposed to be happening because of a community member who reports something. So we really appreciate that. Because again, it allows us to deal with something much faster than otherwise. So we continue to look for ways to be better at engaging our community with regard to that. Second part of communications, when things happen, we are never able to be faster than social media. So it is just the way it is. And so we know that. And we have to regularly remind ourselves that our goal is not to try to pump out information as fast as we possibly can. We want to pump out accurate information as fast as we possibly can. And sometimes that might be just something short that kind of gets people like, okay, they're aware, they're dealing with it, and we're going to get back to you as soon as we possibly can with more information. It could be just as simple as that. But whatever it is we want to communicate, we want to be sure that it's accurate. The other thing is, there are situations that we deal with that sometimes involve multiple law enforcement agencies or more than one city. I think an easy, quick example, but there are many, is 109th Avenue that separates Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy and Oxbow Creek and Champlin Park and Jackson. Those are two cities on either side of 109th. So to the north, it's Champlin, to the south, it's Brooklyn Park. And so we're working sometimes with multiple agencies, whether it's the cities or the law enforcement or both. And it's really important that we coordinate communications because we do get multiple requests sometimes, especially from law enforcement, that we're not communicating something that before they do and vice versa. So a lot of that is happening in kind of bigger types of things in the community, and we just want to be sure that we're making sure that we're all saying something that we're comfortable with, that is accurate and transparent, and that helps people get the information they need to kind of move forward and take the next steps with regard to their own concerns and worries about their kids. Back to Tim.
The vigilant mindset, it's a phrase, it's a culture of mind. It's, I've lived there for 30 years in a vigilant mindset, 30 plus years now, without dating myself, but it's important to have that. It's important to have that, and we all do in our day-to-day lives. I mean, Greg mentioned the airport. There's a vigilant mindset right there when you go to the airport. But for us, it's how we make ourselves better and how we become better at being vigilant, but in a soft way. Being hyper-vigilant will wear you out. But being vigilant in a way that you can carry on with your life, carry on with your day-to-day things is the way is kind of that sweet spot we try to achieve. So that awareness of our surroundings, the awareness of our technology, of our culture, our school culture, our connections, research into different ways to become safer. We have debriefings. Whenever we have an incident, we debrief. And that helps us learn from that incident, and that helps us become vigilant for the next time that might happen. This complacency is not good. And so we try to promote an anti-complacency culture by constantly striving for what's better, what is better for us, what could we try. The Idea Factory is kind of a way of just saying, hey, we're always going to try to improve. And there's always something out there that's worth trying. And so no idea is a bad idea as far as I'm concerned. And then remaining open and aware of other viewpoints. I think that also aids to the vigilant mindset. Just because you've experienced one thing and it worked out and you're vigilant for it to happen again doesn't mean that another viewpoint can't come in and make that next time it might happen even better. So that all goes into being vigilant without being hyper-vigilant, which is a way to do it day to day. So we strive for that as an administrative group, and we try to understand, help the principals and the APs and everybody that has to go through this kind of training understand that this is continuously being worked on. It's just living, the phrase living, breathing thing, that's what this is. Security is a living, breathing thing that just keeps evolving.
And I think I'll just piggyback on that. Safety and security, certain topics invite more viewpoints than others. That's just the nature of the work that we do. But safety and security is certainly one of those. There's a lot of different viewpoints on how you get there. And so to remain open to that on a regular basis, we believe is a very important thing to do. Because you never know what might be a better way to handle something. So we wanted to end with 3 scenarios of typical things that we that we have to deal with that we would call an incident, which may not be what people necessarily think about. So I'm going to start with the first one, and something that we would characterize as an incident that impacts us on a fairly regular basis in Minnesota is weather. And I'm not just talking about icy roads or sleet or something like that. A quick example that we just dealt with that kind of really gave us a run for our money was a recent tornado watch. All morning, anytime we get a watch, we have multiple people monitoring the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service is who we use for our information, and they will do webinars with school districts throughout the day if they believe that there's a weather event that will in some way, shape, or form impact safe travel to and from school or the safety during the school day. So we had a tornado watch. A watch is not something that we would necessarily close down events or schools for of any type, but we're monitoring that type of thing. And it turned into a warning rapidly, and it was moving across the metro at a pretty fast pace. From the time it hit the southern, I would say the southwestern part of our district, to the time it exited the northeastern part of the district, it was about 40 minutes. And the challenge that we had during that time, we were releasing a lot of schools at that time. I think our high schools were starting to release. And what was happening is tornado sirens were going off in parts of our district, but they were not going off in other parts of our district. So we had certain administrators saying, what do we do? And other administrators would say, why is there a problem? The weather is fine, right? And we have buses moving from what would be an area where there's a big concern into a safer area where there isn't necessarily a current, and then the reverse was happening, right? So I wanted to bring BJ to just talk about some of the protocols. We won't get into the whole story necessarily, but the protocols that we use and the considerations that we have and the communication that goes on with different types of weather events.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. It's one of those events where it's who are we contacting? Who are we always in communication with? So like Greg mentioned, the National Weather Service is really our go-to. They are the forecasting entity and experts, and so we really rely on what they're telling us. We love the briefings that we get. It almost feels like it's every day, at least some of the days lately, where again, whether it's the smoke and the air quality, or again, we're at a higher threat level for severe weather, or you have the winter storm potential impacts. And so that whole entire breadth of anything that's weather related is really coming down and being communicated by them. And then like Greg said, they set up these webinars. And so we always have folks attending the webinars. I tend to be one of them. But again, that kind of takes your attention away from the day-to-day just to focus then on the webinar and kind of wait maybe what's coming. From that point forward, if we end up jumping into an actual threat, for my department specifically, we really need to kind of take pause, the day-to-day ceases, and then we have to jump into action and determine where are we at in that moment in time. And so this example that Greg mentioned, it was right at high school release time. I think it had been about 10 years since the district had had anything equivalent at that time of day. So, something during the school day, very different. Kids are safe in the buildings. The staff can take care of that. But here we have students being released, one, just to go outside. Two, some had already been released and are on buses. And part of our system then too encompasses not only just Anoka-Hennepin schools, but it's all of our partnership, schools and districts. So we had non-public students, our private school partners, They were already on shuttle buses navigating towards our high schools where they transfer buses, which again is all outside. We had, vehicles that were already in other districts that are outside that are outside our district, picking them up to bring them back home. And so, when you have such a wild event happening, again, it's to quickly unfold what those details are to determine, okay, well, what do we have going on? Because like Greg said, from the time it was in our southwest corner, again, sirens going off, and people can hear sirens from quite a distance. And the National Weather Service has changed some of the, the stats on how they do their warning issuances. And now it's, it's geographically based. So it's not county-based anymore like it used to be, which was almost too big. So they've really honed in on that over the last few years and changed that as part of their practice. But that's where, like Greg said, we had schools wondering what the heck was going on, and we had schools that were truly, at a potential threat for danger. And so, again, it's finding all of those things in that process. Who do we have to jump into? And again, thankfully, I have a great team that, again, our coordinators then are jumping on the phone with those non-public or those private school partners. We've got 8+ contractors that are servicing our district. So from buses to vans and everything in between, we've got to get on the horn with them, and they're scattered all over. So again, this isn't one entity where they're just leaving their garage. This isn't just the moment in time where we know where everyone is. They're literally scattered throughout. And so it's honing in on where those locations are and who, again, is in danger versus who's not. And that's where things can get a little sticky because, is this we have to call everybody? Is it easier for us to push out this warning and say, yep, everybody's got to take shelter? Though if you're up in Ham Lake, we maybe know that you're not in any sort of danger, but again, we don't have great communication tools to get to every individual vehicle or every individual bus where, again, we're putting that pressure on our contractors to use their dispatching protocols to radio those drivers. But again, they're driving. They're not grabbing their phone. They're not hearing that alert from whatever their weather app may be. And again, just like Tim mentioned, it's all coordination with our neighboring districts. We're part of Northwest Suburban, so again, we have partnerships there, and we're bringing kids outside of our district. So the long and short of it here is it becomes a very quick and intensive communication logjam that has to be sorted out.
Yeah, and we learned a lot from that. I mean, we've dealt with many situations. I would say I've dealt with many situations where we had to communicate the same message out to all our buildings. This was the first one we were communicating with every building in the district, but it wasn't the same message. We had to make unique messages per building and give them timely advice on how to manage this depending on what was happening. So that was a unique circumstance that we learned a lot from. So thanks, BJ. The next scenario that is utility-related issues, and there's a few things that can shut a school down fairly quickly. Oh, go ahead.
Superintendent McIntyre?
I don't want to miss the opportunity to point out the level of coordination that goes into, especially in the wintertime, when you have 13 different cities with 13 different ways of plowing snow. Or, Brooklyn Center has 5 school districts that touch that community. So we are really in constant communication with our neighbors. And with everything BJ said, we're on those early, these guys aren't sleeping much when those events are sneaking up on us. Snow events are harder to predict than cold. Cold are pretty reliable. Snow's much more difficult. And we still do the old school drive it around, and Greg will call me and tell me there's a lot of snow here, there's not much there. And, because of our size, you can have just a little bit of snow in one part of the district and a lot in another. And so what does that mean for all 3 tiers of our busing and being able to turn that around? So a lot of different variables go in there, and as you can imagine, everyone's kind of an expert on the weather. So know that the team, we watch this and monitor it very closely moving up, and things do change, and we know we have to make a decision early so that you can run on time if we're going to run on time. So those are always challenging ones, and a lot of, I just wanted you to hear a lot of pieces that go into that work, especially in the wintertime ones, because people have strong opinions about them.
Yeah. I think people wonder why we drive around. The reality is because of the size of our district, you can have very different snowfall amounts in different parts of the district, as well as different snow plow, as Superintendent McIntyre mentioned, snow plowing regimens. And sometimes a bus can get through a neighborhood. The problem is the Prius in front of it can't. And so if it gets stuck in, somewhere behind a vehicle that is stuck and it's got a busload of kids and, it's 10 below zero, yeah, that can potentially be a pretty big concern for us if help isn't on the way quickly. So those are the types of things that we're trying to evaluate. We're also looking at, we know we have walkers. And so what are the walking conditions? Do we think this is going to be plowed? Are we going to have kids walking down the middle of a street because the snow is too deep on the sides? There's no sidewalks. I mean, those are the types of things that we're trying to evaluate very quickly to be able to determine whether it's safe to have school or not. So I think the criticism comes sometimes from someone driving a truck says, I made it to work just fine. And they probably did. And that's why I'm driving a truck around, is to make sure that, I have that awareness. But it's a challenge, but we try to make the best possible decision we can with the information we have. And, I think we do okay. We always get opinions, though, and that's okay. We welcome that.
And you'll always hear me say, board members, we always want to be in session as long as we can do it safely, but we want to have school. So we try to do everything we can to make sure we do that safely. And with 8,000 employees, we have people driving who work here from around the metro or and beyond. So making sure that when we do hold school, we have the adults present as well, and they can get to work to and from safely as well. So, but our goal always is to hold school whenever we can. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Let me jump in.
Sure. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about a different type, which is power, water, sewer. I'll speak about connectivity, but these are some of the things that when they work, we don't think about. When they don't, you're aware of it pretty quickly. So I'll turn it over to Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So much like weather, we have various things that impact me and, my side of the house, so to speak. One thing we had earlier in the year, May 20th, we had a significant power outage at Hoover. And normally we're on first name basis with all our vendor reps and stuff like that. And we get the call that power's down. We immediately go to the site, see what that says, and then we'll either call, text, or email our vendor rep, because they'll be able to tell us a little bit more than what the website says. The website's pretty good. Most of the power outages that have happened in my time here are 2 hours or less. May 20th was more significant because it took down a transformer, and so we were getting real-time updates, that were a little more better, informed than the website was. So we were able to talk to people on site and, NOAA and CNP just to talk about food, how are we doing, what are we doing. And Greg was lucky enough to take that call and go right to the site, because typically what will happen is when we get one of these calls, me or one of my staff, whoever has kind of a little more free availability, will go to the site to be that spot, that single point of contact. So we have somebody on site, because they're gonna know when their power comes on even before the vendor rep calls us or whatever. So at least helps that informed chain of just communication. Hey, we're back on. And now we start kind of doing the debrief and making sure all our air handlers are working. So if it's middle of summer, middle of winter, whatever we have heat, we have, all the things to make sure that we're still comfortable and we can maintain the safety and security of the students in the school. Another thing was water. We had a significant amount of rain on July 23rd that, showed us a lot of weaknesses in our roof, and we got so much so quick that it overwhelmed our downspouts. So we saw roof issues. So again, we all took a different building, went there to see how bad is the roof leak or the water infiltration. Can we help support them? What can we do? And that was just a way for us to kind of divide and conquer to make sure we're supporting our frontline staff, get it cleaned up, address it, and making sure we're not doing any further damage to our infrastructures. Those are some of the things that we've kind of gone through from my lens, that we're just always, looking at strategic planning, as far as our roofing systems and our building envelopes, windows, things that we know are leaking or aging and stuff like that, as far as, kind of getting those up to snuff in our LTFMs, so.
Yeah, and the power is an issue for sure, depending on when it happens. And then we have to engage child nutrition, because we have to determine whether or not we're gonna have hot lunch or cold lunch, because you can't have hot lunch if you don't have power. And so those are quick determinations, and then whether or not we're gonna be potentially transporting someone at a different time. You gotta upend the whole system and kind of retool that, so, and then communicate it out to families, because you want to be sure that if you're dropping a student off, for example, and they're young, at their house at a different time than the folks are used to, that's not a scenario that we can have. So we want to be sure that when we're dropping them off, we know that there's somebody there to meet them. Those are just various examples of things that kind of get triggered when we have power outages and so forth. Connectivity is up there with regard to the internet. We do rely heavily on that for a variety of different things, whether it's our visitor management system, security, and we have backup systems for that. We have backup systems for all sorts of different things, but you know, those are the types of things that we need to address rapidly, because a lot of teaching and learning depends on that on a regular basis, student management, attendance, right, a variety of different things like that.
Thank you, Coach Oracle. This team continues to undersell their skills. One of our extreme cold days, I think we had 5 buildings that had water main breaks because of cold weather, and that created flooding in their ability to get that cleaned up and have school the next day. Many would see that, but it's extreme work in extreme conditions that can happen, and this team just kind of rolls up their sleeves and gets it done. So those are the kinds of things that you can't predict. We try to, anticipate certain things, but some things you just can't, and then you just react with a super efficient process. So that's the one that comes to my mind when we had that cold weather day, and
Yep.
Ben calls and says, hey, we got 5 buildings with water main breaks. And so those are the kinds of things that let's not make one day turn into 2 or 3 days out of school.
Right. Last scenario, as you know, there are things that happen in our communities that don't have anything to do with our schools. And sometimes those are tragedies or different types of criminal behavior that occurs, and law enforcement is responding to something, and it could be in close proximity to our schools. We are very fortunate that they let us know this right away, and it gives us the opportunity to, again, assemble the right team to try to figure out what we need to do for each particular school and what we need to communicate depending on the nature of what's happening. These things don't, same type of thing occurs with any type of crisis. They don't always unfold in a neat package. And so you're trying to anticipate any and all types of things that we need to make sure that we're letting schools know that they need to do. So I'll turn it over to Tim to just kind of finish up on this and some of the protocols that we follow in those types of situations.
Sure, I try to work by, if it's predictable, it's preventable. I think I mentioned that to the board before. Like the weather, you can predict it all you want, but you may not be right about it, and these kinds of things happen too. You cannot predict. If I thought I could predict in my wildest dreams some of the things that we've had to deal with as a result of what goes on in our communities during the summer here, tragically, at the end of the last school year, whether we have kids that we need to decide if they can take their ACT tests because of a large community event going on, large law enforcement event going on, or whether we have to lock down a school. That law enforcement event that's completely out of our control becomes something we have to deal with the minute we're informed. And we take a pretty quick, hard look at what we're dealing with. We assemble a team, a district-level team. We work with the schools directly. I'll go to the site if that's what it calls for and communicate back to the district office. We tabletop a lot of these, but you can't predict some of the things we've had to work with. And whether it's a weekend, whether it's the night before graduation and something happens down in Minneapolis that then directly might affect our graduating ceremonies the next day, we communicate. We get our team together. We decide logistically on how we're going to plan to deal with that event. Law enforcement's very good at letting me know, here's what you're dealing with, here's how long this might take us to take care of it, and we'll let you know when we're done. And in the meantime, we deal with it internally, and we have our team, and we work through our communication department, and we communicate out externally to parents and families as soon as we can about something. But again, we have to be careful if it's a law enforcement event, what we communicate. So working with them is key on how our success is looked at in the end. And I know sometimes, I wish you would have told us that sooner. Well, there's a lot of things we can't say because we have to keep things close to the vest as to what's really going on. In the meantime, we're managing the situation as far as students and staff go. So we do our best. We can't beat social media. You've said that before. I love police clips. but I hate police clips, right? A lot of people get going online and they hear things, they listen to radio, they listen to police radio communications, and they probably know more than they probably should know in most situations. And yet we have to deal with the reality of how we keep kids and staff safe and work with those law enforcement agencies. So I think it's a really good team that we have, and I think we learn something every time we go through it. But it is what these bullets say. It's strategic, it's logistical, and it's very methodical in how we do things.
So I'll just end with another benefit of strong partnerships with law enforcement, which is, that are built on trust, that we're going to, if we have information, that we're going to use it wisely to try to make sure, first and foremost, that people are safe. But many of our buildings are used 7 days a week, day and night, and so there's a lot of things going on. And we're fortunate because of the relationships that we have. A lot of our law enforcement partners know that. They know a lot about our schools. They know a lot about our activities and our events. And so as a result of that, they think of things so that it's the type of communication or the type of things that they worry about. We kind of catapult ahead, pretty rapidly because of that information sharing that occurs. So that's just one of many reasons why we value those partnerships so much. So with that, sorry for the long-winded presentation here, but a lot of ground to cover. We'd take any questions or comments from board members.
Any questions or comments from board members? Director DeShane?
Just really quickly, thank you so much for not only this presentation, which is a great overview and a recap of all of the important work you do, but thank you for the work you do. Keeping our staff and our students safe is super important, and it really matters. So I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Director Adet?
Just a question, or it might be something to answer later, but I'm just curious if there's a way for you to bring forward additional things that you need. We talked about some projects that we had approved, and some of them have been going on for a long time, but I know we would be interested in, since the situations are always changing and the technology is always changing, it feels like you get your latest system in place and 3 years later you're like, well, this old thing. So how do you keep the board and superintendent and others up to speed on things you think you need so that we can make sure we evaluate getting them? Is there a way today, or?
I absolutely think we could figure something out where maybe mid-year we bring a set of options and recommendations based on what it is we see and are doing. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways we could do that, but yeah, I think we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, what I think would be useful is maybe just ideas you have about particular issues you want to try to improve, and then what are some ways you might do it, and we can evaluate those types of things, because there's ever increasing amounts of all of this stuff out there in the world, and I know we all want to have really good systems for it. So we do have really good systems for it, but it's the point you've all made about continually improving it that I think is the deal. So thanks.
We could put a list together pretty quickly.
I figured you could, but we should, and
Yeah.
you guys know, you manage all the buildings. You can't ever do all of them, but
Right.
Being able to evaluate them, I think would be good.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Director Hoekman?
Yeah, thank you. There is so much that goes in. You pointed out three really big scenarios where you have to respond quickly to these demands, and how do we do the right thing for the children and the families in the situation? Because, of course, giving up those sweet children, whether those new kids that are going to be getting on the bus soon for their first time, or kids who are maybe in a parking lot, or all these wide-ranging scenarios that we have the responsibility for these kids. There's just so much to look out for. So thank you for your vigilance. And with that, you talked a little bit about some of the drills and practices that we do. Are there other things that you can think of? And again, not today, not to think of, but just that communication piece really becomes so challenging in this spur of the moment, as you were talking about. So many different people. What if that contact person is absent for the day. There's just so much to think of, and I appreciate your work. And just, again, that idea of always seeking more answers to make certain our kids are safe.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other, Director Langenfeld?
I just certainly want to thank you for all your work as well. I think one of the things that for our public to know is that when a call comes in, if they have concerns, they can reach out, I'm assuming, to the superintendent, and it will go directly to you. Sometimes trying to get you would be more challenging in a crisis or any of those scenarios. And so to call the superintendent's office if a concern, whether it be 1, 2, or 3, or all of the above, I think is really important, that people know if they see something, hear something, or are thinking about something, to Director Audette's things, or know of something, to get that information to you, because there's always people who have those thoughts and may not get all the communication they need or have questions. So, but sometimes people may try to, source you out at a time when you cannot be sourced out at that time, but you have a concern, they have a concern, so maybe.
So if I could respond, I would
Yeah,
say
please.
to schools, the main line, the communications department, any and all of those, we funnel, there's a multiple of ways that people can communicate those concerns, and they will funnel to us. So I don't want to feel like there's just one or a
Right,
limited number. They can really reach, we just want them to reach out.
Exactly.
And our buildings know to let us know, and we get it in the right hands, and then we can deploy from there.
That sounds great. My other question is really in regard to the support for you for your own, things go on nationally in all of those places for professional development for your work. I would assume you have contacts, associations, and things at a national level and beyond that we don't even talk about much, but you're getting that support and feel that you've got, and maybe it goes to the resources, do you have everything you need to be in the know, kind of thing, so.
Yeah.
Want to make sure, I mean, I
There are
think
an
we all.
abundance of resources out there, almost an overabundance, so you
Yeah.
have to kind of vet that pretty carefully. And
Right.
there's always something to sell as well, so there's that evaluation process that has to go into determining whether it helps achieve the goals that we
But
have,
there-
or whether it's practical, but yeah.
Yeah, professional organizations
Sure.
and things out there.
Yep,
Focus on law enforcement. So, anyway, thank you.
thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you guys for all you do. It's much
Thank you.
appreciated. All right, the next item on our agenda is item 4B, Secondary Social Studies UBDs. Welcome again, Superintendent McIntyre, Sarah Hunter, Executive Director for Learning and Achievement, and team.
Thank you, Co-Chair Arco. So as our team's coming in, I'll kind of do a little bit of some resetting for us. We've been working at this for a while through our process, and there's been a lot of work by a lot of people. So to kind of help ground us a bit, if you think back, board members, to the spring of this past year, the board agreed on a 2-step process to help us work through the curriculum adoption materials that we needed to tackle that are coming now and the ones that are coming in the future. And that was approval of the materials, think textbooks or those kind of concrete materials, and then the actual content that shows up in our UBDs and unit plans. So at the April 14th work session, the long work session, we covered a lot of ground. We moved forward some expectations for a number of courses, and there's 4 social studies courses tonight that we're following up on. So first of all, U.S. Studies 7, the board directed us to purchase the U.S. Studies 7 book, the National Geographic U.S. History book, and the board approved those May 5th. And they were going to, next steps this summer, align the text to the 2011 social studies standards. So a team did come together, they completed that work. Some of them are with you tonight, or with us tonight. And really, that's the second part of the process now, is to come forward and bring those UBDs forward for your review and discussion, ultimately, hopefully, for future approval, so that we can have those ready to go for the school year. So that was that U.S. history, the U.S. Studies, 7th grade. We also had World History 11, very similar process. That same night, recommended a purchase of the World History 11 National Geographic book. The board approved those materials May 5th. And then again, asked that the team work on those UBDs this summer. That work was done in June, and now bringing those forward for review and discussion for hopefully future approval. And then AP Psychology, a little different with that one because of the College Board requirements, but again, a similar process in that trying to get the updated textbook and then get alignment with the UBDs for board review and discussion. And again, future approval that we would need to continue to offer that course. The one that was a little more unique was the U.S. History 10 course. So we've been at this process with that course for quite a while, and on the 14th of April, again, the board gave some direction to allow our teachers to review, kind of take a step back and look at what's available to us since we had been piloting for a while. So there were a number of new opportunities and options available as things evolve and develop, and the team has done some work as well in that area to try to keep that on time as well. And so we got these 4 courses tonight. We still have 13 social studies courses that need to be in place by the 26-27 school year. So we've begun to share some ideas around a streamlined adoption process that could help us over the course of the future months coming, that could help us try to hit those targets too. And we pushed that out in draft form to you about a week or so ago. So tonight we have teachers with us to just be able to talk to you about that process, answer your questions, and hopefully help us continue to get things moving and in place in time for the start of the school year. So team's settled in and ready to go, it looks like. So I'll turn it over to our team. Thank you.
Good evening, co-chairs DeShane and Arco, Superintendent McIntyre, members of the board, and members of our community, both here and online. I am Sarah Hunter. I have the privilege of leading Learning and Achievement in Anoka-Hennepin as of July 1st. So I feel really lucky to have teachers who have been in this work longer than I have been in Anoka-Hennepin to talk about our process. We stand ready to answer questions about the UBDs, but I want to make sure that I introduce the team. So Holly Johnson is here, U.S. Studies 7 teacher from Oakview Middle School. So when talking about the U.S. Studies 7 UBDs, she is here and able to speak to that. And then Beth Holgrimson from Andover High School is a part of the U.S. 10 team. So again, the hope to be able to pilot and then adopt in that content area. She can speak to some of that work. And then I have 3 members of my team, the Learning and Achievement team, who are also here as a part of the sort of support structure to make sure we get this work done. Sarah Gomez on that end, and Kevin Bross and Ann Norstead. So I think I will pause and say, I'll hand the floor back to you for questions, and we're ready to respond to questions either about the process of creating of the UBDs or specific questions about this work. Thank you for having us tonight.
And thank you for coming. So I guess I'll start by opening up to any board members. I have plenty of questions myself, but does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? We've all had a chance to view the UBDs, so. Director Adet.
Maybe first question, could you just give us a summary of basically where you think we are, what has been done as far as the UBDs that you have shared, and I think there's kind of like 2 sets, so in some cases, so just where are we? Where do you think we are? And what do you think or propose the next steps could be?
Great. Thank you for the question, Director Adet. So we have completed all of the UBDs that needed to be ready for this school year. So ideally, we would be rolling those out to teachers as they come back. So in the next couple of weeks, we'd like to be onboarding those content area teams to their UBDs so that they can start the school year with those materials. The direction was to write the UBDs to the 2011 standards. So the team has completed that work, and we're ready for your both your feedback and then ideally your approval to move forward. So again, all of the content areas that we were to work on this summer are ready, and yes, ready for teachers when they come back. And then I think speaking to the US History 10, in some ways that feels like they are all important, right? But I think from a timing perspective, I know that Superintendent McIntyre mentioned we have many more courses that need adoption of new materials by next fall. So the proposal for US History 10 for the adoption process and sort of streamlining our process for adoption would be the first of quite a few that we need to move through this year with the board's approval.
Director Adett.
Thanks, if I could follow up. So, thanks, that's helpful. With respect to the 2011 standards that were prepared for this year, could you just give us an overview of basically what had to be done? What needed to be done, and how did you go about that?
Great question. I'm going to start, but then I'll hand it to the team. So during the pilot process, the materials, the curriculum writers wrote those, the UBDs to the new standards. So that work, they essentially needed to look at our adopted materials and write them to fit with the 2011 standards so that we could instruct to those standards for this school year. So that meant the additional areas that would have been a part of the new standards that go into effect next fall were not included, and the content that is a part of each of the standards for 2011 are now a part of the UBDs. What did I miss?
I think I can add that for looking at what we had done in the previous 2011 UBDs, what the difference was is looking at what they were and taking out old materials that we would no longer be using, our old textbook, any of those links, those were no longer going to be resources for us. So those had to be taken out, and then we were basically going through the new textbook and putting in, okay, here's the new material, which would fit that exact thing that we were teaching before.
Right. So was it, I think I got lost in one part. I thought we would take the old standard and do what you said, fix them, fix the broken links, you know.
Yep.
But you sort of seemed to imply that we took the new standards
Sorry.
and
That was me
worked
misspeaking.
backwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, new textbook to the old standards. So the materials so the way that when you look
Okay.
at the dates at the top of the UBDs for this course, you'll see the 2015 date was the first date that those were written, and now this summer's date, where the team inserted the correct new materials that teachers will have this fall.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
And Director Odette, I think you're picking up on a unique distinction on this particular course. So we did do both at the direction of the board in April. You want to see, kind of try to pilot what's that writing look like to the new standards. So they wrote to the old ones and the new ones for the board to decide. That was unique to this seventh grade course, not the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Understood.
so you might be remembering some of that. So the team did both, right? And you have access to those electronically as you've received those.
I printed them.
Yeah, there they are. Even better.
Director Langenfeld.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to that, when we're thinking, and I know that you completed that exercise at both the 2011 and the 21 standards? Yeah. So my question is, and especially for Holly, how do you see that? Did you see significant difference? I kept looking back and forth at the document and saying, okay, where's it different? It's not like it's redlined, what's new, what's not. So it would be very important, I think, to hear from your perspective and as representative of the teachers. What did you see that was significantly different in those standards? And how will that implementation next fall be, how will that change?
So, the difference, if we're looking at the way that the two are written,
Right.
2011 and the 2021s, I think that I would say the major differences is kind of us focus on building skills versus just memorization or that kind of content. In terms of the content we're teaching, it's a lot of the same, like we're teaching US history. So it does get a little bit longer in terms of the years. For example, if we stick to that 2011 standards, it starts really with the US Constitution and goes through present day. Well, to present day for 2011. Now, if looking at the new ones, or the 2021s, it does go a little bit further back. It goes back more to colonization, Revolutionary War. I think a lot of US history teachers would be like, we want to teach all of the history, and then to present, which is now, I guess. So I guess if I could be a little bit more succinct, differences, there's actually a little bit more content in terms of the length of years. And then the focus is more on skill building. We're still teaching those same topics, but trying to get kids to be more literate in the area of social studies. We're building the writing and the reading skills and the discussion skills.
Okay. Because, again, if you start looking at the documents just for, misunderstandings and terminology and things very similar, and that's very apparent, but it's really looking at what students know and can do when they're completing that work. So, anyway, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Like I said, I have quite a few I'll ask, but figured I'd give everybody else a chance. Okay, so what I'm very interested in is the U.S. History 7 standards written with minimal compliance and a balanced approach. So first, let me just provide context for the public so they understand what exactly I'm getting at. To the best of my knowledge, if you compare the old standards to the new, the old social studies standards for U.S. History 7, adopted in 2011, contain 4 strands that we have to teach. It's citizenship and government, economics, geography, and history. The 2021 standards contain those 4, and then ethnic studies as well. So, just to read, right out of an MDE document anyone can download, I'm just going to read just 2 of the standards. So if you look at, it's an ethnic studies strand with code 7.5.23.1, the benchmark states, examine the benefits and consequences of power and privilege on issues associated with poverty, income, and the accumulation of wealth. Stated it before, I'll state it again. I don't think Karl Marx could have written that better himself. Another one that's very interesting that I found, I'll read out loud. So if we go down to, again, ethnic studies strand, code 7.5.25.1, if we go to the standard, it says, use ethnic and indigenous studies methods and sources in order to understand the roots of contemporary systems of oppression and apply lessons from the past, here's the real key, in order to eliminate historical and contemporary injustices. So that's a standard passed by the state of Minnesota. So now, if I hop over to our friend Google and just search, what is the definition of social justice activism? It says, the practice of working towards a more equitable society by taking direct action to address systemic issues that cause inequality and oppression. So it's interesting then that if we look at what the standard is calling for, that last sentence, it says, in order to eliminate historical and contemporary injustices. The new standards are essentially the state of Minnesota building social justice activism into the curriculum. And this is, to those who don't understand what CRT is, this is it right here. Like, it is in writing now. You can download it from MDE's website. They want your children to learn this. So that is why I take the highly cautious approach to the new curriculum, because so far as I'm concerned, it's just poison through and through. And unsurprisingly, it was passed when a single party had total control of the state of Minnesota for 2 years. There was no bipartisan discussion or agreement on this. It was single party tyranny is what this is. So now I guess all of our kids have to learn this poison. So my feelings on this are not terribly surprising then. So let me just start with my questions for how the new standards were written in the balanced approach that minimizes specifically the divisive content. So, just for the curriculum writing team, which of the social studies standards did you consider to be divisive according to how they have been discussed at board meetings, and obviously based on what I've just said as well? But when you were writing them, what standards did you consider to be divisive in the first place? Because you have to identify them in order to minimize and balance them.
I think I could start. The team was writing to the 2011 standards, and the standards that you were referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair Arco, are from the 2021. So these materials that you see this evening are not inclusive of the ethnic studies standards per board direction.
Yeah, no, so I know we wrote those. I was referring to the new standards also written to, so sorry, the new standards written, but in a balanced and minimized way, if that makes sense. Because there's the 2 versions Corey had mentioned.
And I would say that wasn't the work that this team worked on this summer, right? What we're bringing to you this evening is only the 2011 UBDs.
No, the team did work on, I'm looking
both.
at, at both 2021 and 2011.
This year, summer.
So I don't know what, I mean, you can share what kind of conversations there might have been. You know, I think, Director Arco, the challenge here is trying to do what you described, this balanced approach with meeting the intent of the standards that are in statute or driven by statute, and what might be determined by, controversial by anyone. So clearly, the board was leaning towards the 2011 standards in our last meeting. So if you want to speak to that.
I'll try. So I was on the 2021 writing team, and we did and they were updated this summer. Going back years, how it starts is we start looking at what's the high priority benchmarks, medium, and low. And we prioritize them because there are so many. Like you read through that, it takes a long time. I cannot do all of those justice. And that's a full team effort. That's all seventh grade teachers looking at all of those documents, going through and prioritizing. And different teachers have different priorities. And also, I'm going to steal your words, we're a little bit creatures of habit. Some of us have been teaching for 20 years. So I know I still want to teach U.S. history, and I'm going to look at what are some overlaps, what are some changes. I'm not going to use that language in any seventh grade classroom, nor are any, I think I can be confident that we're not using those words in front of seventh graders. We're going to be using age appropriate, and none of us want to touch anything that's super controversial because that's just not what we're here for. So I think I'm answering your question and looking at what the high priority to low priority. Can I remember off the top of my head where that one fits? I have a guess, and it's not high, but that's where we started. And then we start looking at where it fits with curriculum, or the content we've done, and then also doing justice to what we've been asked. But we cannot do a whole lesson on all of those standards. That would.
And if I can make clarification, what you mentioned as a benchmark, our standards are the skills that the kids have to do. So then all of those benchmarks are assigned to a standard. And again, there are some of those that we just don't have time for. We don't address, depending on what it says or how it's written. We're like, this is just too in-depth for us to get into, so we're not going to assess that standard with that benchmark. And that's where some of the high priority benchmarks come in, or what are we covering?
So then it sounds like you can select which benchmarks you'll use to meet said standard?
Yes.
That,
We are supposed to, it would still be
Yeah.
a low priority. So
Yeah.
could it be taught, to some level? But again, I trust all my colleagues that they're going to teach it at a seventh grade appropriate level.
And when we first wrote the standards, we didn't include any ethnic studies benchmarks in any of those 2021 documents. We were directed not to include those. I believe last summer we were supposed to split them up, and they all went into a different content area. And so the appropriate content area maybe took an ethnic benchmark study. But again, I think all of our teams, I know 7th or 10th grade studies deemed them lower priority than the other content ones that we were covering.
okay, so then, kind of as a follow-up to that, I guess the first question is, what does compliance look like? But what does minimal compliance look like? I mean, you kind of need one to answer the other. So if I were to come in, say I'm from MDE, and I'm like, hey, did you guys investigate the struggle for immigration rights and the rights of all immigrants in the United States, Code 7.5.24.2? Like, what would satisfy that? Is it a lesson that is one class long? Doesn't seem like it, because there's not enough time, you said, to kind of go through all of these in extraordinary depth. Is it half of a lesson? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 2 minutes? It's an oddly specific question, but to get at the heart of what minimal compliance looks like, that's, I guess, maybe where you start with it.
I don't know if we can define minimal compliance. I don't know, would we be in trouble with the state? Is that what you're asking, or?
What is the metric the state or the district or whoever the ultimate authority, so probably the state, uses to determine if these were taught in the way that the state wants them taught? I mean, maybe we have our own metric, we defend or justify, but like, what is that metric, I guess?
I don't think there's a metric.
You-
There's no established metric. I don't,
I don't-
right?
Yeah. Or the
The
state of
state's-
Minnesota would have to define that, I don't
Yeah,
know.
they've never given any district
Uh-uh.
an actual number, right? I think what I'm hearing is you heard the board's direction. Those ones that are most controversial were identified as a low priority. So you're clearly spending the minimum amount of time on those because you've elevated others as a high priority and medium.
Yep.
Use your language there. So, I mean, that was the intent, that's what we were directed to do in April.
Okay.
Sounds like, so that's how you approached it in those
Well, and
sessions
even
we
in
were writing?
previous, like even the first time that they were written,
Yeah.
is going way back for all of the subject levels, it was starting by identifying the high, medium, and low, right?
Yeah, yep.
So some of them, because I got the UBDs originally, when they were originally written, before I was on the board, but then kind of in the midst of that adoption process, and then I got these new ones. I did a kind of a side-by-side comparison. There has been a significant improvement in the language of the UBDs, so well done, I appreciate that. I do think, I'm not contradicting you in any way, but I think in some way, I don't know if it was high or medium, but one of the ethnic studies strands, I believe, was prioritized in the way it was originally written. So it's good to see that at least changed. So, okay, I'm just gonna, and I guess I don't know exactly what question to ask next, but then, because it sounds to me like we need to teach every standard, but then some of them just aren't a priority, like, I guess, I don't really understand that, I suppose, because,
Again, I think there's a confusion between the standards. There, for US history and world history, there are 5 standards. They are skill-based standards about questioning and primary and secondary sources and things like that. The way we teach those standards is through the benchmarks and the content. So we need to decide what benchmarks are going to be best to get to that skill. And then in era 1, we might teach standards 1 and 2 really well. In era 2, we might teach standards 3 and 4 really well with that content. And like Holly said, we're looking at the new benchmarks, we're writing them in kid-friendly language so that kids understand what we're talking about, but we also don't necessarily veer too far from what we already know. So we're trying to incorporate a little bit of what we've done with a little bit that's new and help kids with these skills is really what we're trying to focus on.
okay. Well, I appreciate the explanation. Director Audette?
Question. Hopefully you're all aware of all of the debate we've had about these standards. So you should have a pretty good feel for where the board is at with it. And, it just gets to it's the same in society. We're not agreeing on this stuff. Somehow our state found a way to get it mandated into the standards. I think the way that Mr. Arco explained is the way. We all saw it. Huge disagreement about it. And so at least for my own self as an individual board member, I have a problem with what is there. So I'm looking for a way to deal with that. I think one thing that you've proposed that makes some sense is to talk about high, medium, and low. But I'm curious, based on what you've heard, what's the way forward that you see? How do you think we can solve this problem? Because it's not, by the way, it's not about this board member, that one, that one, that one, that one. We represent people. We represent our families and our communities. Believe me, they tell us what they think. And so, and I'm in the middle of a campaign personally, so I'm talking to a lot of people. Believe me, we talk about this issue. So there's no question that we don't have broad-based support for what this is. So we have to figure out a way to deal with what has been put in front of us, in my opinion, irresponsibly, but we still have to deal with it. In a really big school district that incorporates all the different people. And the way to do that is not going to be to do it the same way the state did it, which is to stand up and tell everybody, you're going to do it, because that's what people object to. So I'm curious how you think we could move this forward. And it's an opinion. I mean, if you don't want to share one, it's okay too, but if anybody does, because I'm looking for a way to move it forward.
I mean, I think it's really hard. Like, we were just talking, like, teaching is such an art and a science, because, and I've been fortunate to be able to look at these standards for 2 years and try to work through them, and how is this gonna look? And again, not fully always really liking it, to be honest. There are things where I'm like, how do we teach this to the kids? How do we do this? And the more I work with them, the better I become at them, but I've been able to do that. So, you know, giving teachers time to work through the standards, letting us work together on what does that look like, the high, low, medium, and also there's only so much time. We don't have time to do all these different things. Sadly, they want us to almost, I mean, you know, here's all the content you need to cover and here's the amount of time you get to cover it in. We'd really like a full year of U.S. history, I'll just say that right now. But it's an art and a science, so like we're very much trying to figure it out. I guess I would really appreciate your trust in that the team that we put together is doing that. We hear what you're saying, we understand. We also don't want this to be like a huge controversy. We want kids to be able to read and write and understand history. We want them to be passionate. We want them to have discussions with each other. And we love your students. We love Ben and Sam just a lot. And so when they come into our classroom, we want them to feel safe and comfortable. And we want to do that in a way that is for the state and the district. And so we want to bring them together as best as we can. So we do want to do good things.
I totally would support what Beth said, and I think I would add, we don't have control over what the state wrote in the standards, but our teams, I'm gonna sound arrogant, our teams are fantastic. Like, the teachers who are doing this work, I think if you were in the room with them, I think everybody would be happy with the work that's being done. Yeah. Because we do push each other. We'll say, hey, I don't agree with this standard, or I don't like how that's written. How is that gonna be best for our students in Anoka-Hennepin? And how do we do that our community will be proud of? Yeah. And so that would be, I would reiterate, please trust us. Like, they're not just me, their team's amazing. All of them, they're doing such great work.
Director DeShane.
Thank you. I think it's important to recap, too, what has led us to this place today where we're at. The district has prioritized having large groups of stakeholders participate in new standard rollouts and adoption of curriculum that suits the needs of those new standards. So I don't remember the exact date, but years ago, multiple years ago, when these new social studies standards went through the whole state process, like you said, that's not a part of the district, that's the state process, community feedback, all sorts of things happen, then the standards become the standards that we have to react to here inside the district. The groups that work on that include teachers, parents in the community, administrators, district level folks that are focused on learning and achievement, board members, and those committees meet regularly, and they discuss and talk about this. At multiple different school board meetings prior to this one, we have had teachers and the teams that worked on that come before us and tell us very similar things to what we're hearing again tonight. We don't all have the same perspective. There are teachers with differing perspectives that are talking about these standards together and working on it with each other to find a path forward that could work at Anoka-Hennepin. You can see the willingness to try to pivot and adjust and meet the needs so that we're not putting our teachers in a position of being 2.5 weeks away from students entering the building and trying to figure out what it is they're going to do in their class. The respect that's being asked for and the trust that's being asked for, I think over and over and over again has been demonstrated to us in those conversations, in the different teachers that have come forward saying the same messages, the different district staff that is coming forward. The new team is saying the same thing as the old team. The process isn't rushed. It isn't hasty. It's deliberate, and it's intentionally meant to include a variety of perspectives so that questions like that can be dealt with. I don't know if there's, I sort of explained my understanding of what I've heard as a board member in this, but if there's anything else you would add about the length of time that this has been worked on and the participants and the variety of perspectives that have been shared, I think that's important context to the discussion.
Any other thoughts or comments from board members? Director Langenfeld?
Thank you. Thank you for all of your work. I think one of the things that I always look for, and it's a look for, is show me where there are concerns. I cursory looked, I didn't print them yet, but I really looked to see if I could find concerning areas, because quite frankly, we all agree. Everyone on this board does, we recognize we serve all children. And that's what we do in public education. We welcome them joyfully from whatever family, wherever they come to us. And so we recognize that our families come from varied perspectives as well. So I think right now it's an extremely polarizing time historically. And I think that what I read, and like I said, I have not gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, but I do believe that the intention is to provide solid social studies education to our kids, to afford them the opportunity to critically think. You can see it in the documents. You can see it when you look at the goals. You can see it in the terminology. You can see that. I think one of the things that is important to the board would be that a recognition that if there are areas that are really problematic or you're seeing concerns, and you know where they may lie. I mean, I think that's a really important thing to perhaps address in your teams and get that to us to say, this is happening and we're not sure where to go with it, kind of thing. I don't think anyone is interested in telling you not to follow any standards or get in trouble. That's not the plan. And I agree that the standards and the actual learning are, you know, how you get there. The road of the art and science of teaching is just that. So I would offer that as I looked at these standards and I did some crosswalking, that's why I said, what do you see as different? I think it's really important that we put into place some ways to begin this process, certainly, and look at how it's working and where we have a problem. If it matters, I don't, you know, again, it goes to perhaps piloting some pieces of it. I don't know. I just think that if we're not ready to go till fall, if that's what the board desires to wait until we absolutely have to, that's one thing. But I'm not seeing things that are really alarming me, and maybe I'm missing something when I crosswalk the units that I've looked at and maybe others are finding things that I'm not seeing. And again, I have not looked at them in deep detail because, quite frankly, I think the people who are behind this, and I trust you. But I also think we need to trust and verify, you know, so that's our job as part of the people who support the community and the taxpayer dollars and all families. So that would be, how do we do that? How do we trust and verify at the same time? And I think the proof will be certainly in what our kids are able to know and demonstrate they can do. So thank you.
Director Simon?
Thank you. And hopefully you can hear me. If not, someone just signal, but I'll try to talk here and hopefully it works. But first of all, thank you very much for your work. You know, you did pivot as the board asked you to, and I know you put a lot of work and passion into that, and thank you, first of all. I just go to the, you know, what is the next step? What does the board do? How do we proceed? And maybe I'm not understanding it completely, but I thought we gave that direction, is that the UBDs were rewritten for the new materials back for the old standards that don't include the items that folks think are controversial, right? So am I understanding correctly that for next school year, we can go forward with that? Like if the board approves that, right? Obviously, we have a two-step process. Board members can look in depth at those UBDs that you wrote for those standards, and we can have a vote on that, not at tonight, but sometime. And then for the new UBDs or the new standards, if you will, they have to be implemented to be compliant with state in 26, 27. So you've written one of them already, right? The seventh grade, US 7, I think, for the new standards, minimum compliance, however we discuss that. And we can do that for other courses, right? And then again, there is an approval step in there where the board has that secondary approval for those UBDs. So I think that board members can look in depth, I mean, very detailed exactly at what those UBDs are for 26, 27 and bring any specific concerns forward. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but is that the path we're hoping to take, or I think we've directed to take that, correct?
Superintendent McIntyre.
Thank you, Director Simon, and I'll try to add some clarity to that. Yeah, for US Study 7, you have a choice, board members, to move forward either the new materials to the old standards or the new ones, but you asked to try that out. With World History 11, new book to old standards, and then for the AP Psych, it's really, we're a bit bound by the College Board requirements to be able to offer that course. With Director Simon laid that out really well. So my recommendation would be to move those forward in that fashion to the August 25th meeting so we can get those approved. In those courses, we have many more courses to come. And I just hope to give that a little added context. I would say that Ms. Holgrimson did a great job trying to capture the tone of the work that was done this summer. I believe they took the board's direction to heart. They understand. It was given clear direction around the areas are controversial. I think Director Audette did a great job explaining the moment we're in, right, as a district and beyond. So I hope you feel and see by them coming here on their time off in the summer that they took that seriously and they did their best to honor that direction of the board that you gave in April and really dug into that. And I'm grateful that teachers leaned into that, because it's not easy. So I believe and trust that our teachers did what you asked them to do. Is it perfect? I don't know for sure, but they sure did try, and they did their best, and they're the ones delivering the instruction. And you saw the changes that were made. I'm glad, Director Arco, you were willing to point out some of, you noticed that. And I would also overlay just a technical piece. This board very clearly laid out and expects that we follow 604.4, and that's in our curriculum policy area, the respectful learning environment. We train every staff member starting last year on this policy again. We just reset that, and we do it again this year. So it sends that message that I think is the common ground amongst the board, and I hope you sense and see that the staff that came in this summer to write this, really their intent was to do what you asked them to do. You might have 6 different opinions on what gradient that hit, but I also think you agree that we want our teachers working on this to help find those materials, and the teachers that are here with us tonight did a great job just kind of explaining the intent, and I think it was clear. They got the direction that was in front of them as far as how to tackle writing these things. So I would recommend, to get these courses in motion for this school year, come back, at least we can decide between now and the 25th, but that would be my recommendation, to get those approved so we can, because we got more to tackle, and we'll keep testing this, stress testing this 2-step process. How can we continually refine it? But we're in this moment right now, so I'll just leave it at that.
Director Audette.
Something I'm just thinking about as we're having the discussion is that I think would be helpful, especially as you contemplate trying to write more, is some sort of a document, I'm going to call it a policy for lack of a better word. But it's maybe a framework. But what it would do is it would define maybe, what we need to try to do is bring some definition to what is objective, if you will, objectionable in the standards. Something that we could talk about in here that we could say, again, we're just back to like it or not, these are the areas that have problems. This would somehow help us to define high, medium, and low. And it would be based upon direction that the school board in theory could give. And say that, okay, this is sort of how we're going to agree to where the problem areas lie and what we should do with those. And the what we should do, to the extent you have to teach the standard, is that's where we have this discussion about in some way telling the other side of that. And we need to talk about that some more in some way, because that's being misinterpreted by a lot of people. They're ascribing ideas or value judgments or whatever to what that is. So it stems from, by the way, it's sort of a takeover of language. We took over language, we called something anti-racist, and then if you don't like the anti-racist, then you must be racist. That was an intentional thing somebody did. It doesn't reflect the reality of what people really think. So if you don't want to teach those principles, that doesn't mean you're racist, but that's what is implied. And so we have to figure out how to work through that. We have to be bigger than the people who created this mess if we're going to try to dig through and solve this for our schools. And so, like, that's what I'm trying to think about, as a way to bring that out so we can talk in a non-values-based way. It's just, these are the problem areas, these are the ones that aren't problems. We can define that based on if anybody on the board has a problem with it, it's a problem area. If we don't, we won't. And I'm imagining that we're going to have a little bit of trouble doing that, but I don't know what else to do other than to try to figure a way through that. If we could create something like that, now I think you might be able to go forward and do some more writing on these new standards with that in mind, and it would give direction for the people who are trying to work their way through it. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know tonight how to do it, but it's what I'm thinking, so I wanted to put it out.
Superintendent McIntyre.
Yeah, thank you. And I think in the spirit of what you're asking for, Director Audette, I'll try to offer a solution, or at least a path forward. So our team already, they've only been here a month, but they have created an alternate or a new curriculum adoption process. So maybe that's something we could fold into that. We gave you a draft to play with. This was intended to align to the two-step process that the board's working under right now. And you know, in there, maybe there's room for adding in that piece you're asking for. Well, it's a framework or a rubric or yeah, I agree with you, it's not really policy, it's just sort of a guidance, like a way to get the work done and how to find it and see it to those controversial areas that may exist. So I think that can be, this really took our 41-step process and really streamlined this, and you know, I understand you may not have had a lot of time to unpack it, but maybe there's potential room in here to put that direction. So I think what you're asking for is clarity, right?
Yeah, I mean,
be able to
clarity
see what
that
you're,
we can talk about, so we can agree we have clarity. So we would, that way we might know it when we see that, okay, I think we found the spot. And then the people that are trying to write it. And another thing I'll offer, this is my own copy, and I was on the committee when we started it X years ago. And I've attempted multiple times to go through and highlight areas that I think are of concern. And usually I go to do that, it's so long. I get going and I pretty quickly remember again that, oh yeah, the standards sort of repeat, they just get more complex. So I normally have stopped highlighting because it's like you get the joke and I get the joke myself too. And I go, I don't really need to, I'm gonna waste the whole highlight. I'm willing to offer up my copy of it if the group wants to evaluate it, to try to make sure that we're getting connected on, yep, those are the issues. Because I only represent one point of view, it's my own, but I certainly am trying to find a way to share with you what those are. And then you can take that and understand, because I think part of this is understanding where people are.
I would just add, this was very helpful for our team to hear, so that, you know, they potentially can go back and refine this this framework that we're bringing forward. And it's up to you, board members, if you want to move in a direction of something like this. I think it's something that can move us through the remaining courses in a different way. So maybe through your feedback, we can make adjustments and changes to some of the new ideas that we've begun to uncover and unpack that can maybe hit most of those common ground areas.
So to quickly answer one of the questions you posed, Director, at a high level, it's pretty much the ethnic studies strand. There's 5 strands. The overwhelming majority of what would be considered divisive is going to be in the ethnic studies strand. So in that spirit, one of the questions I was going to ask, I think you guys have kind of answered it in and amongst the explanations you gave, so I appreciate that, is essentially what is the opposing view? And this is something I would actually like to clarify myself because I do think there's a lot of confusion out in the community. To those, let's just say that the divided nature of politics doesn't always allow people to actually understand the other side of the aisle, so to speak. And so since we're dealing with something that was unfortunately put in place under a one-party rule in Minnesota, I'm going to provide a very specific example of what I am referring to when I mean the counterpoint, because some people walk away and say, oh, it's like you're referring to white supremacy. No, not in the slightest. That is not the opposing view. So there's a man by the name of Thomas Sowell. To give a brief background, almost like an introduction to him, because I have an example of this here. He was born in North Carolina in 1930, raised in Harlem. Dr. Sowell overcame extraordinary obstacles early in life. He was orphaned at a young age. He was adopted and raised during the Great Depression. Despite dropping out of high school and facing the challenges of poverty and segregation, he went on to serve in the U.S. military. Dr. Sowell earned his bachelor's degree from Harvard University, a master's from Columbia University, and a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago, where he studied under Milton Friedman. Early in his academic life, Sowell identified as a self-declared Marxist. However, his views shifted dramatically after working as an intern at the U.S. Department of Labor, where he witnessed firsthand the unintended consequences of government policy. Funny, it's almost like we're in that same situation. Throughout his distinguished career, Dr. Sowell has taught at prestigious institutions including Cornell, UCLA, Amherst, and has been a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University since 1980. He has authored over 40 books. I've read many of them. His writing is renowned for its clarity, depth, and fearless examination of politically sensitive issues. He has also testified before U.S. Congress multiple times. He is a recipient of the National Humanities Medal and continues to write books even to this day despite being 95 years old. He is a national treasure, and by any metric, he is an expert. Tragically, I don't think people are as aware of him as they should be in modern American society because, as I said, he's a national treasure. So, because the divisive nature of what we're dealing with is the ethnic studies strand, which essentially purports that, I'm going to oversimplify this, but also not really, that all disparities can really just be boiled down to there's power differentials and the oppressor group oppressing the oppressed group. Thomas Sowell actually wrote a book right here called Ethnic America. And in said book, he goes through historically a lot of the different ethnic groups that immigrated to America, when they immigrated, the challenges they faced, whether or not they overcame them, and why. And he provides, rather than reducing everything down to power differentials, he actually provides very specific, historically accurate reasons as to why they either succeeded or did not succeed that are more nuanced and don't divide people into oppressor and oppressed groups, which is what the CRT currently written into the Minnesota curriculum does. So the reason I bring all of this up is as we go forward in continuing to write more curriculum, it would be a simple thing to have a book like this, Ethnic America, be a supplemental material to classes to act as a counterpoint to the ethnic studies strands that we have to use. This book is very inexpensive, contains amazing content. I've read it myself. So I'm just throwing that out there. So now when anyone wonders what exactly we're talking about when we say, please include the counterpoint, this is essentially it. You could pull almost any of his writings, his over 40 books. A lot of the content he's written would do it. I think this captures it particularly well. He's also written a book called Discrimination and Disparities, where he specifically discusses why disparities exist that's not necessarily a result of discrimination, which again is the counterpoint to what a lot of this ethnic studies curriculum is. So I figured I'd throw that out there. That is essentially my final comment, but I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done and the presentation that you gave. Director Langenfeld has a comment.
Yes. Director Arco has talked about this gentleman more than once, and I went out and started looking around and listened to a podcast of his. I think he is a very learned man. He is a man who I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, believes in civil discourse and understanding different perspectives and is very open to critical thinking and dialogue so that people can shape their own opinions. But he is, as you note, he is a person who has evidence-based facts behind what he's writing and talking about. And so I look at him as an individual that is the kind of person that would model what our teachers, we would hope, are doing, is affording our kids that same difference, that they are able to ensure that our children can leave the doors engaged in seeking for understanding, looking at making sure it's evidence-based instead of just a misunderstanding or an intentional whatever, but keeping that in mind. So, and I would encourage you, he does some great podcasts. I haven't read the books, but those are the kinds of the people out there who are open to broad thinking and want to engage in those important conversations and have done their homework. And I think that's why he's such a well thought out and has taught in these extraordinary Ivy League colleges and so forth. So anyway, so that's when I listened to the podcast, I thought, yeah, this is a person who understands how to talk about history and is willing to sit down and have those really important, hard conversations. And putting them in a UBD, and this information is to be able to afford that, and then it's really making sure that people have the resources and support they need to be able to have those conversations with their students. Because this is a man who has spent his entire life in these conversations. And they're not easy because we all have different varied perspectives. So that's kind of where we are historically right now too, is that we may not be open. So I do want that document to look at, Matt, if you wouldn't mind sharing it, and I'm very serious as well. So that's my comment.
Director Hoekman.
Yeah, thank you for these comments, and thank you all for all the hard work. I think this just highlights just the enormous task and responsibility that we have in front of us to make certain that students get an excellent opportunity to learn so many perspectives, but really to be able to come in a classroom and make certain that it's a safe place to have discussions that give the quality information so that they can go into adulthood clearly. So thank you all for the hard work. And what I do appreciate, although this process has been so drawn out, very much longer than we had planned, and the dedication that you've shown here to make this a quality process, I really appreciate. But also, I think you spoke to at one point that you've learned a lot, or that many teachers in this process can just learn a lot and make certain that, they just approach it in a very thoughtful way. And I hope that we can, as a district, allow and afford the other teachers who haven't been a part of this process to experience that as well, because this is a challenge for our communities, for our students, and definitely then for the teachers who they've got a new textbook that they have to figure out how to use, and now they have to make certain that they're presenting this information in a thoughtful manner. So thank you for the time that you've put in, and board, I hope that we can take these thoughts tonight and put together something that ensures that we're carefully instructing our kids in a thoughtful way.
Any other thoughts or comments from board members? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next discussion.
I guess I am looking for direction, board members, so I don't want to leave not being clear on what's expected of our team. It's a busy next 2 weeks. We have all of our staff coming back. I think I heard two things, but I need your help in correcting me if I'm wrong. So I hear, what can we do for these courses right now? And then what can we do process-wise for the ones that are coming, that we still have a little more runway for? Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, knowing, just where this board is, where you all land on this, and where can we get enough votes to get the UBDs in place, I think, what I'm hearing and what I'm recommending is, for US Study 7, take the new book that was written to the old standards, those UBDs, and approve that. So 2011 standards with the new book. The World History 11, same thing, new book to the old previous standards. That's how the UBDs were written, and approve those UBDs for the time being. AP Psychology, we have College Board standards we have to follow to be able to offer the course. The teachers have written our UBDs to comply with those, so we can continue to offer the AP Psychology course. And then lastly, what I'm suggesting for US History 10 is kind of the same approach where we're writing to the previous standards. I know we took a step back. And help me with this one. Go ahead, Sarah. if you
Yeah,
wanna
this
jump
one
in.
is us, we are one step before that. What we are bringing forward is, we are hoping to be able to pilot. So that course, we need to look, for new materials, and then we would be writing UBDs following the board's direction.
And I think the problem with that is, board members, what I'm sensing is we don't have agreement on anything being piloted to the new standards, if we're using all the new standards. So what I'm recommending there then is the team can go back and look at a recommendation for adopting one of the previously piloted texts that would align to the 2011 standards. I'm just where we're continually spinning our wheels, and I'm looking for board direction on that, because these are the courses we need to land now versus the ones we have more, there's 13 more coming, but we have more needs there. So we can follow up on that one. That one's a little more complicated, but I'm hearing new materials to old standards is the theme for now.
Yes, and then I would add what Director Adet described, where we start defining what is divisive and then what we're going to do about it. That is the bridge that will lead to adoption of new standards.
Yeah, and
So
I
that
would-
would be the follow-up piece as well, in my opinion.
My best thinking right now is, and we can talk more as a team, but that's something I think we fold into an adoption process that can get us through the next set of, and we don't only have just 13 courses for social studies. We got elementary and secondary math coming. We have a lot of work to do, so we got to really kind of think about those content areas too. But for now, I feel like these are the courses. I'm looking for feedback so we know what to bring back to the board in 2 weeks. I don't know if we can accomplish that last piece in just a handful of days. With the next 2 weeks, all of our staff are coming back, and I got to be thoughtful of capacity of our team at this point.
I think, unless somebody wants to tell me otherwise, what you've described sounds correct. And then, yeah, what I was asking for, that's not like an expectation for the next week or two. That's just like a next piece to do, forward thinking,
More
so.
time, yeah.
Just
Director Wingfield.
a point of clarity. We asked them to write the UBDs in both for the 21 and the 11 standards, correct? And
Just
we-
for 7th grade.
Yes, I recognize that. And so then the question becomes, what are we doing with that? Is this something, board work that we need to do where we look at what they've written? I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that work because that was part of why we asked them to do it and consider it as a pilot. Am I sleeping here, or did I miss something? Didn't we talk about that? And that's why we asked them, so that we could look at what they've written for the new standards.
I was under the assumption that board members have done that. We've provided, I think board members got them at the end of June.
Right.
You've had 6 to 8 weeks to look at them, so I would assume at this point, you're going to need to give us direction on 2011 or 2021 standards. We did try, that pilot kind of concept with 7th grade. We
Right.
just need a decision from the board on one or the other for the August 25th meeting. And I'm hearing probably more traction here with the 2011. I'm sensing we don't have 4 votes for the 2021, because you have those UBDs, you can see what they wrote.
Right,
You've had them for a few weeks.
true.
Director Adet?
I'm nodding my head in agreement with what Mr. McIntyre said. I think the discussion tonight brings us further forward into how we might be able to get to a place where we can do something with the new standards, but for now, we got school to start. It's going to make the most sense to we bought the new books so that they could get used with the old standards, and then we've got more work to do to figure out how to navigate through the mess. But I appreciate too, everybody I know is sincere, so I think it's just a comment. How do we move away from all these value judgments about how people are thinking and feeling about it? We should try to not do that. We should just stick to the realities and the facts, and then, because everybody in here is good people. So the closer we can get to making it feel that way, I think might go a little bit of a way toward working on the trust part of it. But that's my opinion.
Director DeShane?
Just an offering, I think that because we have asked the teams to do the work on the 2021 standards for 7th grade, that would be and since we've had weeks to look at those and dive in and maybe find those places where there's still some concern in the standard and in how that was translated in the UBD, we could use that for the discussion of the curriculum adoption process, the rubric framework that we're going to talk about for like identifying and thinking about that on the future courses that are coming before us. I mean, the work has been done. We've got that ready to use as an example in that discussion.
Yeah, that work's not throwaway. That work moved us closer. It's not totally there yet, but so don't throw the document away. We'll probably change it a little bit more, but yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments from board members? All right, well, thank you guys very much for that for the discussion and just all the work that you did. It's much appreciated. The next item on our agenda is item 4C, secondary science and instructional methodology. Once again, welcome Superintendent McIntyre, Sarah Hunter, Executive Director for Learning and Achievement and team.
All right, thank you, Co-Chair Arco. So I'll do the same here, kind of reset us all on where we're at. I think that was a great question by Director Audette earlier, so I'll try to do that again here. So where we're at with biology, I believe, based on the direction of April 14th's work session, we needed that time to do the work. At that point, the direction was to not purchase new materials and update the course documents to reflect the 2019 standards aligning to the biology dynamics of life text. So team has worked on that and completed that work. You have that in front of you to review. We've had that, again, for a little bit of time this summer. And similarly, with physics, I know we're going to get to that too. The direction was not to buy new materials, continue with the current book, and then have those UBDs aligned, the new alignment of the 2025 course structure to the materials. So I believe that was also done in June as well. Get a nod there, okay. So that was the direction of the board back in April, and that was the work that's been done. We're bringing that work back to you, and hopefully with, again, my hope would be, at our next regular board meeting to, if that's satisfactory, get those approved so we can get those in place for the start of the school year. So with that, I'll turn it back over. It looks like everybody's settled in, so thank you.
Do any board members have any thoughts or comments or anything to discuss? Director Hochman.
Yeah, thank you for being here tonight. In looking and reviewing the UBDs that have been written, thanks everyone for the hard work that went into that and making certain that our students have some quality materials provided by the quality staff that's in front of them. Considering things that I've noticed in here, can you explain or expand upon what would be done in the 3 strands of the scientific, proposed scientific inquiry ideas that come with the new standards from the state? One piece is that inquiry-based learning is highlighted. Can you explain how that was addressed in these documents?
I can try, I guess. I suppose it's a little thinking back because we actually wrote a lot of the document over a couple years previous to this last year. And then this last year, a lot of the work we did was just aligning it with the materials we have now versus the materials we expected to be purchasing. But thinking back, I guess, just in how we're thinking about assessing a lot of what students do, we've tried to come up with ways to assess students that are more skill-based or task-based, or have them doing something or demonstrating their knowledge rather than just a paper pencil test. So I think that's one of the biggest changes with these new standards, is that we're not necessarily just doing paper pencil tests at the end of each unit. We're trying to build a set of skills and then have students demonstrate those skills. Within doing that, they're showing their knowledge of concepts, but it's not just, can you answer this question?
Can I ask a clarifying question, Director Hoekman? You're referencing the 3 dimensions of the standards, so you're thinking about the science and engineering practices when you pose that question. Is that accurate?
I'm thinking of that, but I'm just thinking of the approach to science, which we discussed at length at some of the past
Yeah.
meetings. And I think that was, at least for me, that's a concern, is to make certain that we are getting the students the information that they need so that they have a strong foundation in the knowledge so that they can then apply those pieces to their learning.
You ask a good question, and I think with any UBD, it starts with the standards. And so, as you mentioned, the science and engineering practices it's the doing, right? And you also want to ensure that the disciplinary core ideas are present, right? And because they're 3-dimensional, that's the content, the vehicle by which the students are going to be able to explore and do. And then the cross-cutting concepts are the way they're going to think about the concepts. So all of those parts are present in the lessons because they're grounded in the standards.
And I think I can maybe add to that. I think what you said is a perfect way of describing it, is we're looking for them to apply that knowledge. So they can't apply that knowledge if they don't have that knowledge. We're assessing their ability to apply it, but in assessing that, we're making sure they must have that knowledge to get to that point. So I think the way we're setting up what we're trying to assess builds in the fact that we need them to have that knowledge to get to where we want them to get to.
Very good. So thank you for that. That's excellent background. And so just in thinking of this new process that we're looking at, the 2 steps, and thinking about what curriculum resources will be used and then what the UBDs look like, just some things to draw forward. In the first unit for motion and kinematics, it's a 9 to 12 day unit. And then likewise in the first unit for biology, that one's a 4-week unit. Yet when you look at, I think this is my concern that I have with the new standards that the state of Minnesota put forward, is that they may be overreached in what students can do in order to get to that point of applying material. How do they attain the knowledge so that they can use it in the way that the state is suggesting that they do? And so then, as it follows, as I look at these UBDs, it also does some of that overreaching in how much, how we're allowing for the teachers to facilitate the learning, to give the students the opportunity to have the foundational knowledge in order to apply it in the way that it's listed in these documents. Furthermore, a concern that I have here is just the curriculum that we put forward, or that was put forward last year, that was voted down, is in some of these documents. So I guess, can anyone address that?
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by that last point about the curriculum that was voted down being in the documents.
So in the biology document, how will we know evidence of learning? Sample, example, phenomenon. Why would a marathon runner become disoriented during a race and then go into a coma shortly after running the race? And that's the exact Unit 1 curriculum that we discussed last year.
we don't have a representative from our curriculum writing team, so nobody that's sitting here was present at that. So we can certainly get back to you on the specifics of that. But my hunch is that it's the phenomena that they were exploring. So I don't know that are you suggesting that the entire unit is exactly what was in the previous resource, or just the scientific phenomena?
I don't know, I
Not
guess
sure.
that's my
Okay.
question.
Well,
Yeah.
we can definitely get clarification on that for you. Because you talk about kind of that big picture, right? And so what the 2019 standards suggest is that students have the opportunity to explore sense-making through that wonderment of a phenomena. So regardless of where the phenomena comes from, in terms of text, right? It's a real-world experience, and that's where we want the kids to dig deep, right? And so by starting with that wonderment, you provide the content knowledge to give them the thirst to learn more about the context for where it comes from.
Very good, thank you for that. I guess that's kind of brings us back to that point where I'm struggling to understand, or I want to ensure that we're following evidence-based learning, in that it seems, or it is suggested through the evidence from psychologists, that in building concepts and understanding, you need to have knowledge first. So this seems to reverse that process once again, where we are asking students to come with conclusions and, as you point out, come up with some sense of wonder about the concept before they have any background knowledge to assess it. And so I just want to make certain that we, again, are giving the students the opportunity to have that foundational knowledge through direct instruction that's shown by evidence as that primary learning piece. And I guess that's my concern with these documents, is that it still seems to somewhat reverse that process from, I guess, just putting the cart before the horse.
I think the way I've come to understand the process, working through writing these UBDs over several years, looking at these new standards for several years, it's a very iterative process. So we see a phenomenon, we come up with our best explanation of it. Then we learn more about what actually is going on in parts of that phenomenon. We come up with a better explanation. And so each step along the way, we're learning more. There's absolutely direct instruction happening at various points within the process. And as students learn more and more, their explanations get better and better. But every time we see something, we try to explain it. If we don't understand it, we come up with our best guess of what's happening. And that's really all we're asking students to do, is to start by being curious, to see something and think about, hey, what is this we're seeing? How can we understand this with the things we already do know? And if we're wrong, how can we correct those things as we learn more?
That is definitely a very reasonable way for, students to build through, we would suggest, and come up with further understanding, because they come up with a question and then we hone down that understanding. I guess I'm just looking at research and data that suggests that the best way, that is a way, but takes a lot of time, and that is not as effective as saying, let's give students information first, let's have some direct instruction, ensure that we're using the knowledge and skills of our teachers to allow for kids to have the vocabulary, the understanding, and information, so that they can then understand the phenomena around the world in a very productive way, in a way that is more effective. And again, that's just what the evidence-based learning shows. So I guess my big question then to end is, are these UBDs still written with that reverse process, or with the approach of giving direct instruction first?
The UBDs are written in alignment with the 2019 standards, which is the directive, right? And so it's both. I mean, I really want you to know that you're not wrong. There is absolutely a space for direct instruction and any various point within the learning process. And there's an opportunity for exploration of scientific phenomena, which is how the 2019 standards were written. So they're both very much present.
Superintendent McIntyre?
Yeah, thank you. You covered a lot of ground there, so I want to try to back up just a bit. I think we have agreement on, when you talk about foundational knowledge, that clearly our direct instruction sets that foundational piece so that application can happen with that learning. So I think of the text and the UBDs as that what we're going to teach, and then there's the how. And I've been talking with some of you about the fact that this board, we've talked a lot about direct instruction, and I need to really say that we agree with you, right? We agree with you in the sense that it's vital for new knowledge. It's going to have to be a critical part of this physics, the biology, anything else we've talked about tonight. And so how are we going to roll that forward? And when you think about the clear, explicit teaching components around direct instruction, and when it comes to modeling and explanation and guided practice and checking for understanding, all those things we know make it work. We've been working through, and we'll be kind of following up with the board about how do we do a better job of integrating that into an alignment with the materials, how we do instruction, and how we evaluate how we're teaching all the way through the teacher evaluation process. So we're looking at how do we have that alignment through the system. So I sometimes think of it as that how is, we're going to have to be really strong on that how for these, as I listen to you talk about the standards, because they're not going to go well without the foundational piece, is I think your point. That foundational knowledge has to be at the core. And in the near future, we have a plan to how do we better embed that direct instruction concept as a core instructional approach that we wrap our other strategies around. We have to have that DI at the heart. So I'm hopeful that will give the board confidence in how, not only are we talking about it, but we're integrating that into the whole process throughout, all the way into how do we support our teachers, how do we coach them, how do we give them feedback, how do we evaluate them at the end, and it's explicit, it's observable, where those expectations are clear, right? Not just optional. So maybe that instructional methodology piece is the glue here to the materials and the UBDs. I don't know, but that to me is how we're going to teach. It's going to be the bridge between some of the rub I'm hearing between what the UBD or what the standards are pushing versus our materials. So I'll let you respond to that, but I know our team has been looking hard at how do we strengthen that direct instruction component? How does that show up in our system? How do we have everyone be accountable for that in a positive, supportive manner, right? I'll pause there. I think you were going to say something.
Well, I had the wonderful opportunity of working at the state level on the new science MCA standard setting process this summer. And in that process, you talk about assessment. In that process, I will guarantee on the new assessments, there are very few questions that are what we would consider DOK 1 and 2, which is basic recall of knowledge. What really needs to happen is kids need to sense make. They have to have the knowledge for certain, so no one's suggesting that should be absent. But the other dimensions are present too. Just like real scientists don't look up facts and write them down, right? They wonder about something and they make sense of it, and that's the process of learning and doing and applying and creating new things in this world or understanding the world in new ways, right? So I think that's why the standards have multiple dimensions, not to say that one is more important than another. It's kind of that brain science, right? We hook our learners with this sense of wonderment, then we anchor them in the direction that they're going to go in terms of what do we want to learn here, and then we learn and we grapple with it, and as Mike suggested, you go back and you continue to make sense of it and go deeper with that process. So I think yes, and all of it is part of the learning process. To get us to be critical thinkers, we need to really walk through all of those phases of the DOK levels, which our state suggests. Yeah.
Director Langenfeld?
Yeah, as a follow-up, when we began this conversation at the board table, I went out and did my own research, again, going back and having taught curriculum and instruction for many years, looking at the educational research behind it. And I'm looking at a document I actually had shared with the superintendent and our co-chairs around it's called Let's Talk Evidence, the case of combining inquiry-based and direct instruction. And it talks about the importance of making sure that that student has the background knowledge, and how do you assess that they have the background knowledge, and then you can move forward. And I actually went to Mike's classroom and watched it in action one day, and saw that began with direct instruction, and then students engaged in lab work. And then there was a lot of inquiry before they went into the lab, went in and did their lab work and worked independently, and I was writing down how many minutes. Could you even tell how many minutes? I put that down. He doesn't know I did this. Anyway, but what I saw then, and came back, brought them back, discussed it, and then checked for misunderstandings as he was going through the labs, so that there was direct instruction going there, depending upon what the student needed. Many were able to just do their own thing and get where they needed to go with this lab. And then brought them all back together and discussed results, and then did more direct instruction as he wrapped up the lesson to prepare him for the next day. So that is a pretty typical way that our teachers teach, and that's the way I always tried to teach, to make sure, though, that even prior knowledge, making sure I knew what my students already knew. And obviously, this was a senior class, and many of these students you had. So I just really think that's a real critical part of making sure that the students have what they need to be successful. And that sometimes is very hard, because the expanse of students that you serve. I think it used to be you could kind of put your arms around the kids, and now you may have them, you can't touch both sides of the wall because students have such different backgrounds. But you can witness this typically happening in every single classroom. In some classrooms, when they're just introducing a concept, of course, you're going to see a lot of direct instruction. And we received the document that talked about Hattie's effect size and those things. Both are important, and that's what the research would tell you. It's important to have both. And so then the important part for us in these documents, to Director Hochman's point, is that we need to make sure that people know, you have classroom teachers who are veterans who understand, the value and how to do this, and the rhythm of this, and so forth, part of the art and science of teaching. But how do we ensure that our new teachers in particular, but all teachers, are doing enough direct instruction? I can tell you the best way I used to say is look at the data. How are the children doing when I give them the exams? And that would tell me that I'm not quite hitting the mark with my kids. So anyway, I put that out there, but I think it is a combination of. It isn't an either or, as you said, Ann. So, thanks.
Director Audette?
Thanks. Yeah, I get the point that it's a combination, and it obviously is, okay, but every time I try to explain my interest in this direct instruction versus these other models, I go to just real-world things. So my son became a pretty decent piano player, and he did it through lessons that we paid for. And she was pretty great, but she made him, she was a direct instructor, right? The piano lessons were pretty focused in the beginning on the fundamentals, how to read music, how to actually do the scales, do all of that stuff. And I paid a lot of money for that, but over time, that developed into something pretty cool. And so the value of the direct instruction is just super important. I'm very confident had she just said, hey, thanks for paying me, go ahead and try it out, he could have done that a lot of times and he wouldn't have mastered it. And I think you could say something similar for teaching somebody to drive don't just get in the car and try it out. We need to teach you how to do it first, and then eventually there's a time for that. So, okay, if you apply that back to school, it's pretty obvious, right? It comes to how much direct instruction are we talking about? And what I personally am looking for is that our primary method of delivery be that. I'm not interested in a primary method of delivery being something different, because I just don't have confidence through my own life experience and through the bit of research I can do. So be that right or wrong, that without a significant amount of that type of learning and teaching, the kids won't be set up to do their best. And so I love the idea of science where you learn something and you try it out. But the learning something is pretty important in science. Science is also kind of a difficult subject. And so, but I don't just apply that to science, I apply it everywhere. So I'm sort of back to thinking about this one. I think is policy language of some sort that defines what we're looking for so that people don't get too far away from what we're after. And I think it's more policy language in my mind maybe than the last idea I had, but it's trying to be prescriptive about what's our point of view on it. What are we looking to have done? And how would we, I guess the word's regulate it, in order to give, I guess, people like me confidence that we're incorporating it at a level that I think makes sense. So I don't know if that can be done, but again, I'm trying to find a way to define what a lot of it or a pretty good amount of it or how it should look, whether it's the primary means of delivery or you probably have a better word for that, but something like that I think could be helpful.
So to kind of chime in here, it is a balance, and I love specifics. So at that work session I had asked, it was, I believe Mr. Walhopper had said, when I asked on average in our current biology curriculum, how much direct instruction is used per class. Again, the key is on average. That doesn't mean straight. That doesn't mean every day, just on average. An answer of 10 minutes was given. I have no reason not to believe that. And so if a typical class period is about 60 minutes and about 1/6 of that, and specifically I'm just referring to biology here, is direct instruction, I think the balance is very lopsided it's just very lopsided, and I don't think it's serving our students. If you look at the current biology MCA score, it bears it out. 44% of students passed the MCA science score for biology in high school. So over half are failing. So something that we're doing, whatever it is, I could be totally wrong, maybe this isn't it, but something we're doing is not working. But just, again, given my experience, given what I do understand about teaching and tutoring and the research I've done, direct instruction does seem to be a core component of how students learn successfully, or I would argue the core component. It's not to dismiss the other pieces that are important as well. And if we're only spending 1/6 on average of the class period engaging in the core component, I think that's contributing heavily to why we're seeing, unfortunately, 56% of our students not pass MCA tests.
If I may, I think my mind wonders what we are thinking about when we think about direct instruction. Are we thinking that it's students sitting and receiving, or are we thinking about, like Director Langenfeld had shared when she was in Mike's class, there was some of that, but there was also when students were working in groups, they were receiving direct instruction at the level that they needed, right? So I think we're all kind of talking about the same thing, but I think it can look a lot of different ways. So if I was an elementary school teacher, if I have a class of 30, I have different groups of students that I'm going to need to instruct at their instructional level so that they can make sense of it. But Director Audette, your example of piano lessons, to me, that is like cracking the code, learning to read, right? It's something that needs explicit, systematic instruction, right? And I think that there is a part of instruction that looks like that, but there's an entire sequence of learning and attaining new knowledge. So to quantify the number of minutes in each lesson or within the course of a unit. I think that's kind of, it's difficult for a number of reasons, because I think it depends on the needs of the students when they come to you. Where are they at? What background knowledge do they have? If they don't have it, you need to spend more time building it. If they've got it, you don't want them sitting there bored with it. You want them to take their learning to the next level, right? So really, that's kind of that art of teaching. You've got to know the kids that come to you, and you need to respond to them in a way that makes sense. Director Arco, you said you have a kindergartner starting, right? You want whoever their teacher is to receive them in a space where they see them, they know their skills, where they're able to shine, and you don't want them to sit and get information they already have, right? You said you've got a student who's a really good reader already. You want that child to be met where they are so that they can receive their best potential. So I think to look at all classrooms and all UBDs and all content through one structured lens would be a disservice to the students that we serve. And not to say that it's not important. It is, and it is present. It absolutely is part of every learning cycle. I think it just really depends on the flow of where you are within that learning cycle.
Director Adjournment.
I appreciate that. I guess, though, it naturally makes me wonder, because when all of this first was presented, it was presented that it was going to be this inquiry-related methodology. So that was sort of the same thing in the other direction. So, and that was how it was originally shared, and some people were excited about it and some of us weren't. I'm not super comfortable with the idea of defining minutes, but I'm hoping we can come up with a way to define the direction in a way that can satisfy people that would say, okay, like our approach is going to be that way. And we've got it going on other subjects too, math and some other places that I personally do not think it's being successful. So I'm trying to say something for now and for as long as I'm here is like, I don't want to go with those methodologies. And so how can we define it in some way that we can at least understand it again? Because I feel like if we have that, now we have something to talk about. Like, maybe it's not minutes, but maybe you could come up with another way. We could have a look at that. We could say, yep, I think that's it, or nope, I don't think that's it, as opposed to just kind of throwing out theories. It would help to dial it in, I think would be good.
And so to follow that up, even if we don't put into like a policy a specific amount of minutes, it's one of those things where you don't have to rigidly define it, but you know for sure when it's too little, and 10 minutes is definitely too little. You could say, like if you did a college-style lecture where it was nothing but, that would be too much. It'd be pretty easy to spot that. But I think the same is true in the reverse, where 10 minutes, I mean, it's 1/6 of the class. And like I said, the only metric we have that tells us directly how are students doing in biology, it says, unfortunately, over half of them are failing. So what we're doing isn't working, and that's why we need to incorporate more of this, at least in my opinion. Director DeShane. Superintendent McIntyre.
Well, I was just going to try to echo what I said earlier. I think there's a shared commitment here. I think we all agree that with robust direct instruction at its core, at the center, everything else is possible, right? So really what the board is looking for, and you've kind of been hungry for, what's evidence of that? How do we know that's going to happen, right? Where can it show up? And I think it's just back to how do we develop our teachers and support them, whether you're a veteran or a brand new coming to us this year. We need to really set some expectations that it's a core part of what we do, so that's a part of the development, coaching, feedback, evaluation process. So as we do our performance evaluation process, we can put that in there so it gets to what Director Audette's saying. There's a commitment to ensure it happens. It's tangible, it's observable. It's a requirement in the sense that it's going to be expected and discussed as part of the instructional piece, not the whole time, but it's at its, at the center or core of what we do. It kind of cuts across content areas. So that's something we've been working on, and I think that would give the board members a more tangible commitment to, yes, it's what needs to happen. Now there's, again, that has to be at the center for anything else it's back to the piano example, I guess, in one hand. That's a good example of how it can work. So I think as we move to the start of the year, I've talked with some of the board members about how can we make that more explicit in how we support and develop and improve the instruction of our teachers. And it's got to be a part of the process we go through in supporting them and ultimately giving feedback and evaluation. At the end, that's meant to be positive, that's meant to be improving the skills of our staff. So, what I'm saying is we can, and I think it's even more powerful than a policy, because if it's a part of each teacher's expectation for improvement as we move through the year, whether you're, again, a veteran or newbie, that's real to them in their day-to-day work as an instructor. And that's the only way, to me, the physics UBDs work. If we don't have that strong foundation of direct instruction, the additional pieces aren't going to get the results we're looking for. So, we're going to have a little, I know I've talked to some of you about this here just recently. We'll have a little bit more for you to look at very soon, and maybe that's the commitment that would help this board feel like we mean it, and we're doing something about it in a very tangible way. So thank you for that. Sorry.
Director DeShane.
Thanks. I just wanted to build on the discussion that's been ongoing and say, I think it's evident that there's a lot of agreement in the board members around the table, in the administrators, in the learning and achievement team, the science department that are working on this with us. And I like to see that. We're continuing to discuss this. We've got to keep talking about this. It's not going to get anywhere if we don't keep having these discussions. So I just first want to acknowledge that and say I really appreciate the tone of this conversation and the questions that have been posed and the responses that we're getting so that we can continue building upon knowledge and information that we all have brought to this discussion in our review of those UBDs, in our understanding of the committee conversations that happened before this. Kind of two things. I think the document that Corey is referencing and the integration of, the integration of direct instruction in teacher evaluation as a look for, as something that is sought out to be seen in the classroom, is a really tangible bridge to get us to the interest of some board members and the interest for accountability, right? And the interest of all of us to have direct instruction be a part of all of the teaching and learning that's happening in our district. I think it's also important to acknowledge that our students that come through our system have exposure to biology concepts and physics concepts in middle school as a part of their life science and their physical science classes. And then I think biology is normally 11th grade. So, these are like our 17-year-old students. They've got a lot of other coursework electives that they're taking. They're going to come with a variety of background knowledge that can be applied and used. And I think Ms. Norstead said it very well. We want our students to be able to get the learning that they need. And that is the respect and the kind of stature that we should give to our teaching staff in their classrooms. They can do that. They can see that, and then they can apply the instructional methods as needed to suit the class that's in front of them. I really think that bridging between the interest, looking at teacher evaluation, and respecting the profession of our teachers, I think we're getting really close to a solution that will be possible and will still hold in high regard the professionalism of all of our teachers. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for this discussion, and I think, UBDs being here is what we will teach, and then the how being left to our experts with observation and commitment in writing to the professional assessment tool. I feel like we're really close to a solution that everybody can get behind.
Any other thoughts or comments from board members? And random question, is Director Simon still remote?
He was just there, but now
All of a sudden I looked and I said,
Oh, okay, he's back. Okay, either way. Any other thoughts or comments or questions from board members? All right, hearing none, I believe that concludes item 4B. Well, thank you guys very much again for the discussion, and thank you for the work that you've done. The next item on our agenda is item 4C. Oh, wait, my apologies. It's not that one. That's the one we just did. We are nearing our last board agenda. Let's not do it again. We are nearing our last board agenda item, item 5, board correspondence and communication. Members, this is your opportunity to share happenings in your community, report on committee assignments or other items of interest. Does anyone have anything to share? All right, well, hearing nothing. Oh, Superintendent McIntyre.
We're just very excited. Our new teachers start next week. All staff are back the 25th. The school year is right around the corner. The buses will be rolling, and we're really excited to get this school year started. So next time we see you, we'll be right in the thick of it on August 25th.
Director DeShane.
That just reminds me, just really quickly, I just want to acknowledge and thank all of our 8th grade web leaders who are going to be going to their training next week. I won't be able to say that before our next board meeting, so that leadership and demonstrating that ability to be there for our younger students really makes a difference. So thank you to all of those 8th graders.
Any other comments from board members? All right, hearing none. The last item is to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Director Adet. A second from Director Langenfeld. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll, please?
Simon?
Aye.
Adet?
Aye.
Langenfeld?
Aye.
Hoekman?
Aye.
DeShane votes aye. Arco?
Aye. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, we are adjourned. The current time is 9:10 PM.